Welcome back to Sleepless Mysteries. On July 1st, 2025, astronomers confirmed something extraordinary, an interstellar comet passing through our solar system. It was named 3I Atlas, the third known visitor from beyond our sun. Unlike the countless comets born within this system, Atlas arrived from the deep unknown, traveling across the galaxy before crossing our skies. It is a wanderer, a messenger from places we may never reach. But while science sees a fragment of ice and rock, others ask a different question. Had its return been foretold long ago? For in the oldest records of human memory, comets were never just objects. They were omens, warnings, and messengers from the heavens. Ancient scribes carved their appearances into stone. Priests declared them signs of kings rising or falling. Entire wars were said to have been predicted by fiery lights in the sky. In Babylon, they were the eyes of the gods. In China, they were celestial dragons. In Mesoamerica, they were fiery serpents carrying the breath of the divine. And always, their arrival was wrapped in awe and dread. Prophecies across civilizations speak of visitors who would come when the stars aligned. Some promise destruction, others transformation. There are fragments of texts that describe lights that blaze and vanish, returning only once in an age. Could Atlas be part of that cycle? Could the ancients, watching the sky without machines, have known more than we believe? Were they warning us or preparing us for travelers from beyond the solar winds? These are not myths spun from imagination alone. They are real writings, preserved in clay, on papyrus, in scrolls hidden deep within temples. Accounts of strange stars that flared and disappeared, of gods who descended in radiant chariots, of heavenly messengers that came only once. The patterns remain, echoing through time, suggesting that perhaps humanity has seen this before. You don't need the images to follow this path. You don't need to see the glow of a comet streaking across the heavens. Just let the words carry you. Close your eyes if you wish. Imagine standing in the desert thousands of years ago, the night sky alive with stars. Suddenly, a new light appears. Blazing, strange, impossible to ignore. The people around you whisper in fear and wonder, is this the sign the prophets spoke of? Is this the return? Before we begin, if you haven't already, subscribe to Sleepless Mysteries so these journeys into the unknown will always be waiting for you. Tap the like button if these stories bring you calm or curiosity. And if you're still awake, share in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, let the present fade. The stars are watching. The comet has come again, a silent traveler from beyond. And the question lingers, did ancient prophecies foretell its return? This is 3I Atlas, Did Ancient Prophecies Foretell Its Return? Unsolved Mysteries for Sleep, and it begins now. The Sumerian Sky Wanderer, Tablets and Their Warnings. The cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, was not only the birthplace of writing, law, and monumental architecture, but also the land where humanity's first astronomers fixed their gaze upon the night sky. Among the clay tablets recovered from Sumerian and Akkadian sites are records of celestial phenomena meticulously documented by priests and scribes. While many entries speak of the phases of the moon or the wanderings of visible planets, a small but haunting group of inscriptions tell of a sky wanderer, a fiery intruder not bound to the usual cycles of the heavens. These tablets, written in cuneiform and buried for millennia beneath the sands of time, describes something that defies the neat patterns of astronomy. A sudden streaking light with a blazing tail, appearing without warning and vanishing into the void. One particularly damaged tablet, recovered from the ruins of Uruk, refers to a star that comes not with the known gods, nor keeps the path of the seven. Scholars have debated this line endlessly. Some argue it refers to a comet, a celestial body long feared in the ancient world as an omen of catastrophe. Others, however, note that the word used for wanderer is distinct from those applied to comets or meteors elsewhere in the Sumerian record. It suggests something both singular and alien, a presence unlike the recurring Halley-type visitors that ancient stargazers came to expect. If this mysterious intruder was real, it might have been an interstellar comet like 3I/Atlas, a body passing through our system once in eternity, seen by terrified eyes who wondered if it would ever return. The warnings inscribed upon these tablets are even more chilling. One fragment, preserved in the British Museum, describes sacrifices performed to calm the fire star that brings hunger. Another invokes Enlil, the storm god, to turn away the tail that drinks the waters of the earth. Such phrases have been interpreted as evidence that the appearance of the sky wanderer coincided with drought, famine, or perhaps a change in climate. Ancient Mesopotamia was highly sensitive to shifts in the flooding cycles of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. If the comet's appearance happened to overlap with a devastating dry season or failed harvest, priests would have naturally drawn a line between the two, cementing in memory a cosmic warning etched into clay. Yet these tablets do more than recount fear. They hint at prophecy. A text from Sippar speaks of the sky wanderer as the herald that comes before the fall of kings. Within a generation of the tablet's creation, the Akkadian Empire collapsed in what historians now call the 4.2 kiloyear event, a massive regional drought that shattered cities and sent people fleeing into the desert. Was this coincidence, or were the priests recording a moment when celestial events seemed to reflect earthly upheaval? To ancient minds, there was no doubt. The star was an omen sent by the gods, announcing the end of empires. When modern astronomers first detected 3 Atlas in 2020, its trajectory revealed something extraordinary. This was not a member of our solar family, but a visitor from the stars, never bound to return. The resonance with the old Sumerian inscriptions is striking. A fiery intruder, unlike the planets and known comets, blazing through the night sky before disappearing forever. Was this the same kind of event witnessed by scribes 5,000 years ago? Could 3i Atlas have been the very same sky wanderer that the ancients feared, passing by again after unfathomable eons, or perhaps a cousin in the same interstellar lineage? Skeptics argue that the tablets are too vague, too damaged to be certain. Many of the inscriptions are fragmentary, their meanings disputed, yet that uncertainty only deepens the mystery. Why did the Sumerians treat this particular celestial object with such awe and dread, setting it apart from the countless stars and comets they knew? The Sky Wanderer does not fit neatly into myth alone. It suggests an event rare enough to sear itself into memory, a fire in the heavens unlike any other. There is another tantalizing layer. In later Babylonian writings, echoes of the Sky Wanderer resurface in texts about the Star of Kingship, a celestial harbinger said to rise when empires are destined to fall. These writings influenced astrology across the Near East, embedding the idea that sudden cosmic visitors carried divine messages. The thread that began in Sumer may have stretched across centuries, weaving itself into the fabric of prophecy. The comet was no longer just a fiery rock, it was a messenger of fate. When archaeologists and epigraphers attempt to reconstruct these texts, they cannot escape the feeling that the ancients were trying to warn the future. The recurring phrase, "it shall return in the time appointed," is especially haunting. To modern scientists, an interstellar comet like 3 Atlas will not return. Its path is open-ended, cast forever into the galactic void. But to Sumerian priests, bound by cycles of myth and cosmic rhythm, nothing was truly gone. Every celestial visitor had its time, its role in the turning wheel of history. Perhaps they believed that the Sky Wanderer would one day blaze again across the sky, bringing with it new upheaval. And so the mystery remains. Were these tablets the first human record of an interstellar visitor, a body like 3i Atlas that only passes once in eternity? Or were they the echoes of ordinary comets magnified by fear and imagination, their sudden brilliance transcribed into omens and prophecy? What we know for certain is that the Sumerians, the first great stargazers of history, took this visitor seriously enough to carve its memory into clay, to associate it with the fall of empires, and to plead with their gods for protection. Today, as we watch new wanderers like 3i Atlas streak through our system, we cannot help but wonder if we are witnessing the same drama that our ancestors once did. The tablets survive as fragile fragments, but their message is clear. The heavens do not always move in predictable patterns, and when they don't, the world below may never be the same. The Sky Wanderer is gone, yet its warnings remain, written in the oldest script on Earth, whispering across 5,000 years, "Beware the fire star, for it brings with it hunger, change, and the end of kings," the Egyptian comet of fire and the fall of dynasties. In the land of the Nile, where the sun itself was worshipped as the god Ra and the night sky was charted with divine precision, celestial phenomena were rarely regarded as random. The Egyptians were among the earliest and most meticulous observers of the heavens. their priests standing vigil in temple observatories to record the movements of stars, planets, and eclipses. Yet among the surviving records of ancient Egypt, there are scattered and mysterious accounts of a blazing comet of fire that streaked across the skies and was later linked to the downfall of kings and dynasties. To the Egyptians, this was no ordinary star. It was a herald of chaos, an omen of divine displeasure, and perhaps even a cosmic intruder, resembling what modern astronomers now recognize in the interstellar comet 3 Atlas. One of the most debated texts comes from the Ipuwer Papyrus, a document written during or after a period of social collapse in Egypt, possibly around the end of the Old Kingdom or during the First Intermediate Period. It describes calamities that befell the land: the Nile failing to flood, famine and pestilence spreading, and rulers losing their grip on power. In one chilling verse, the papyrus refers to the sky being confused and a fire star blazing through the heavens, casting terror among the people. Some scholars have dismissed this as poetic metaphor, but others suggest it records the observation of a comet whose appearance coincided with environmental catastrophe. If so, then the comet of fire may have been blamed for upheavals that fractured Egyptian society, ushering in an age of chaos. Additional evidence emerges from temple inscriptions. At Karnak, there is mention of a celestial flame crossing the heavens like the wrath of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of destruction. Sekhmet was often associated with plague and divine punishment, and her fiery image makes a striking parallel to the sudden, destructive appearance of a comet. In Egyptian myth, the stars and planets were orderly, eternal, and cyclical, but a blazing visitor that tore across the sky in no predictable path would have been regarded as profoundly unnatural. To the priest astronomers, it could only mean that the gods were sending a warning, or preparing to unleash divine judgment. The timing of such celestial events also aligns eerily with moments of collapse. Around 2200 BCE, Egypt experienced severe droughts linked to the same 4.2 kiloyear event that devastated Mesopotamia. The Nile floods failed for decades, agriculture collapsed, and the centralized authority of the pharaohs crumbled. Some researchers suggest that a bright comet or interstellar visitor may have appeared during this crisis, cementing its image in cultural memory as the fiery harbinger of dynasty-ending catastrophe. To the Egyptians, the connection between sky and earth was inseparable. If the heavens sent a fiery messenger, it was a sign that the foundation of Maat, the cosmic order upheld by the pharaoh, was breaking. Later texts continue the motif. During the Middle Kingdom, there are references in star charts to strangers among the stars. In one account preserved in the Cairo Museum, a blazing object is described as the flame of heaven that returns not again. The phrasing is curious, for Egyptian astronomers knew well the cycles of ordinary comets. This suggests they may have witnessed something that did not return within memory, just as 3 Atlas will not. Could it have been an interstellar visitor, mistaken for a divine torch? If so, then their phrase, "returns not again," becomes strikingly prophetic, echoing across millennia to our modern understanding of interstellar trajectories. Even more compelling is the link between comets and kingship. Pharaohs were believed to embody divine order. Their fall was often explained not by politics or economics, but by cosmic signs. One story from the reign of Amenemhat I tells of a night when the heavens burned with a fiery flame, followed by conspiracies and the king's death. Later retellings in the prophecy of Neferti present a vision of a fiery sky announcing the fall of dynasties and the rise of new rulers chosen by the gods. These accounts suggest that comets were not merely seen as portents, but as instruments of dynastic destiny, woven into the very cycle of Egyptian history. The physical effects of comets may also have shaped memory. A particularly close pass of a large comet could have left visible debris, triggering meteor showers or atmospheric disturbances. Dust in the sky might have dimmed the sun, altered weather patterns, or even contributed to crop failures. To an agrarian society, utterly dependent on the Nile floods and sunlight for grain, such disturbances would have been devastating. If famine followed a fiery apparition, the cause and effect would have seemed self-evident. The comet of fire had poisoned the sky and withdrawn the gods' blessing from the land. One cannot overlook the mythological resonance. Egyptian cosmology was filled with images of serpents, fiery deities, and celestial battles. The comet, with its glowing head and long tail, could easily have been seen as the serpent Apophis, the embodiment of chaos, striking at Ra's solar bark as it sailed across the heavens. Each night, priests performed rituals to help Ra defeat Apophis, ensuring the dawn would come again. A sudden comet blazing across the sky might have been interpreted as Apophis escaping restraint, a visible reminder that chaos was breaking loose. And when dynasties fell, when famine spread, it would have seemed that Apophis had triumphed, at least for a time. Modern astronomers note that comets are not rare, but the appearance of an exceptionally bright or unusually placed one would have been extraordinary in the ancient sky. Interstellar comets like 3I Atlas are rarer still, visible for only a brief passage before disappearing forever. If such a body passed through the solar system thousands of years ago, the Egyptians may well have seen it, etched it into memory, and built myths around its passing. Their priests would not have spoken of orbital mechanics, but of destiny, of fire stars that signaled the gods' anger and the end of kings. The enduring question is whether the Comet of Fire was a real event or a mythological construct. The lack of consistent records makes certainty impossible. Yet the convergence of texts from the Ipuwer papyrus to temple inscriptions suggests a shared cultural memory of something unusual, something disruptive in the heavens that coincided with times of great earthly change. Perhaps the comet was Halley's in one of its brighter returns. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it was something stranger, a visitor from beyond, as elusive and fleeting as 3I Atlas, searing itself into the sky before vanishing forever. The legacy of these fiery omens persisted throughout Egyptian history. Even under Greek and Roman rule, Egyptian astrologers continued to connect comets with political upheaval and disaster. Their lore influenced the broader Mediterranean world, shaping Roman fears that comets foretold the deaths of emperors. In this way, the Egyptian Comet of Fire lived on, not only as a memory of a celestial event, but as a symbol of cosmic disorder that toppled rulers and reshaped history. When we gaze at modern comets through telescopes and satellites, we see icy fragments of the cosmos, natural wanderers governed by the laws of physics. Yet for the ancients, the comet was alive, a fiery messenger, a warning, a god's weapon flung across the sky. The Egyptians, with their unshakable sense of cosmic order, interpreted its sudden arrival as the breaking of balance, the unraveling of Ma'at. Dynasties rose and fell under its watchful blaze, their stories intertwined with a star that never followed the rules of heaven. And so, the mystery endures. Was the Comet of Fire a fragment of myth, a symbol of chaos given celestial form? Or was it the echo of a true cosmic visitor, blazing once across the Nile skies, never to return? The question remains unanswered, but the fear it inspired still lingers in the ancient words carved into stone: the heavens burned and kings fell. The Greek oracle of Delphi's cryptic star prophecies. High upon the slopes of Mount Parnassus, nestled above the valley of Phocis, lay the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi, one of the most revered spiritual centers in the ancient world. Here, for nearly 1,000 years, kings, generals, and commoners alike sought the words of the Pythia, the oracle of Delphi, who sat in a trance within the temple and gave cryptic pronouncements believed to be inspired by the god of prophecy himself. The Greeks trusted her wisdom for matters of war and peace, trade and agriculture, and even for glimpses into the mysteries of the cosmos. Among her many recorded sayings are tantalizing references to fiery stars, blazing omens, and wanderers in the heavens, whose arrival was thought to herald disaster or transformation. Some scholars have wondered whether these cryptic pronouncements may preserve ancient memories of unusual celestial visitors, perhaps even events akin to the interstellar passage of comets like 3I Atlas. The Greeks were already a people deeply attuned to the skies. They charted the constellations and imagined them as gods, heroes, and monsters immortalized in the heavens. They observed planetary motions and called them planetes, wanderers. Yet comets stood apart. They arrived suddenly, without the predictable rhythm of the planets, blazing a fiery trail that seemed to defy the order of the cosmos. For a culture that prized cosmic harmony, comets were symbols of disruption, intrusions of chaos into the carefully balanced heavens. The Oracle of Delphi, as the interpreter of divine will, became a natural voice through which the Greeks could make sense of such apparitions. Ancient writers like Plutarch and Diodorus record several occasions when comets or fiery stars were connected with oracular warnings. One particularly cryptic prophecy is said to have been delivered before the Peloponnesian War. The Pythia spoke of a torch in the sky that shall divide the sons of Hellas. Within a generation, a great comet was indeed observed, and the Greek world plunged into decades of civil strife that shattered Athens' golden age. Whether coincidence or deliberate linkage, the memory of a fiery celestial omen tied to war resonated deeply. For the Greeks, the heavens did not merely reflect events on earth, they announced them. Another prophecy, attributed to the oracle, tells of a wandering flame that would appear when kings fell. Some scholars connect this to the death of Alexander the Great. Ancient chronicles note that a bright comet, or perhaps a nova, was seen in the skies not long before his sudden and mysterious demise in Babylon. To his contemporaries, Alexander was a semi-divine figure, the son of Zeus Ammon, and his fall required an explanation that transcended mere poison or fever. The blazing star, interpreted through the words of Delphi, became the celestial sign of his passing, fulfilling a prophecy that had haunted his reign. Whether true or invented after the fact, the story illustrates how firmly cometary apparitions and oracular pronouncements were woven together in Greek thought. Delphi's cryptic language often spoke in riddles, allowing multiple interpretations. This ambiguity was part of its power. For example, one preserved fragment declares, "The heavens shall blaze with a serpent of fire, and from its tail shall fall ash upon the earth." To modern eyes, this could easily describe a comet's long, twisting tail shedding debris. Ancient Greeks, however, may have taken it as a warning of plague, famine, or military defeat. The serpent of fire echoed mythological imagery. Typhon, the monstrous serpent who once battled Zeus, or the dragon Ladon who guarded the golden apples. Thus, a comet could be interpreted as the return of chaos beasts from myth, breaking into the orderly realm of the gods. Delphi was not only spiritual, but political. City-states often consulted the oracle before major campaigns. When a comet or blazing star appeared, the Pythia's pronouncements gained even more weight. A fiery omen could embolden one side while demoralizing another. In this way, cryptic star prophecies became tools of psychological warfare, shaping the choices of rulers who believed the heavens themselves were casting judgment. The oracle's words about fiery wanderers were more than superstition, they were decisive forces in history. Modern scholars have tried to trace the astronomical basis of these prophecies. Greek records do confirm several comets visible in antiquity, including what was likely Halley's comet during its returns. Yet the descriptions associated with Delphi sometimes suggest something rarer, objects that came not again, blazing once across the sky and vanishing forever. This echoes the peculiar nature of interstellar comets like 3I Atlas, which enter the solar system on hyperbolic paths, never to return. Could the Greeks, through the oracle, have preserved cultural memory of such a singular celestial visitor? One intriguing clue comes from a passage attributed to the philosopher Seneca, who, though Roman, reflected heavily on Greek thought. He noted that comets were unlike planets and stars, unpredictable and possibly of cosmic origin far beyond the known heavens. He speculated that they were not atmospheric phenomena, as some believed, but independent celestial bodies. Though Seneca lived centuries after Delphi's peak, his ideas may have been shaped by older Greek traditions. If the oracle spoke of flames that return not again, perhaps she was voicing the awe of a culture witnessing a rare, one-time cosmic traveler. The prophecies also reveal how comets were bound to the idea of fate. For the Greeks, destiny was not random. It was guided by the Moirai, the fates, whose decrees could not be altered even by Zeus himself. A comet appearing in the sky was thus not merely a natural event, but a revelation of what the fates had already woven. The oracle's role was to interpret these signs, translating the blazing chaos of the heavens into words that mortals could grasp. Her cryptic language mirrored the comet's nature, sudden, dazzling, incomprehensible, and final. The imagery of comets as fiery torches or spears in the sky also resonated with Greek martial culture. In Homer's Iliad, Zeus himself wields a blazing star as an omen of war. When such an object appeared in reality, Greeks would naturally associate it with divine intervention in their struggles. The oracle, speaking in Apollo's voice, reinforced this belief, weaving cosmic fire into the fabric of earthly battle. For warriors and kings, to ignore such a sign was unthinkable. There is also the matter of fear. Greek culture prized rational thought, yet beneath the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle lay a primal awe of the unknown. The sudden, fiery blaze of a comet in the night sky was terrifying, a rupture in the cosmos that no calculation could predict. Delphi gave voice to that fear, cloaking it in prophecy and myth, giving structure to the inexplicable. The oracle's words reassured as much as they warned, framing chaos as part of divine order. Today, as astronomers trace the paths of comets with mathematical precision, the oracle's cryptic prophecies may seem like superstition. Yet, the resonance remains. When 3 Atlas blazed into detection, its interstellar origin reminded us that the universe is not as predictable as we often believe. It echoed the same awe and dread that once filled the Greeks when they saw a fiery stranger in the heavens. The oracle's riddles remind us that humans have always sought meaning in the unexplained, translating the language of the cosmos into warnings, stories, and destinies. In the end, the mystery of Delphi's star prophecies lies in their ambiguity. Were they poetic descriptions of real comets interpreted as omens, or were they allegorical visions meant to cloak political and social warnings in divine authority? Either way, they reveal a culture that understood the profound link between heaven and earth. To the Greeks, the comet was never just a rock of ice and dust. It was a message, and the Oracle of Delphi was its interpreter. And though the Pythia's voice has long fallen silent, her cryptic words still echo across time. The heavens blaze, the fates stir, and the destinies of kings are written not only on earth, but in the wandering fires of the stars. The Mayan codices and the return of the sky serpent. Deep in the jungles of Central America, beneath the canopy where temples pierce the sky and ancient pyramids rise like stone mountains, the Maya recorded their visions of the cosmos with a precision unmatched in the ancient world. Their astronomer priests charted the heavens with astonishing accuracy, predicting eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and celestial cycles spanning centuries. But in the surviving codices, rare bark paper books that escape the flames of conquest, there are haunting references to a fiery visitor, a great sky serpent that appeared unexpectedly, blazing across the firmament. To the Maya, it was no ordinary star. It was a living force, a serpent of fire and smoke that devoured worlds, heralded catastrophe, and perhaps even whispered of returns from beyond the known cosmos. When modern astronomers discovered interstellar comets like 3I Atlas, the echo of those ancient warnings became harder to ignore. Could the Maya have glimpsed such a celestial wanderer and woven it into their prophecies of destruction and rebirth? The Mayan worldview was one of cycles, endless repetitions of creation, destruction, and renewal. Time itself was sacred, measured through the long count calendar that spanned millennia. Stars and planets were gods, their movements written into destiny. Yet, comets broke these cycles. They were unpredictable, sudden intruders that could not be woven neatly into the cosmic rhythm. In Mayan texts, they were often described as smoking stars, serpentine in form, with long, fiery tails curling across the heavens. To see one was to witness the return of the sky serpent, Kukulkan, or Quetzalcoatl in broader Mesoamerican lore, but now cast not as a benevolent god, but as a herald of destruction. The Dresden Codex, one of the best preserved Mayan manuscripts, contains pages filled with astronomical calculations and apocalyptic imagery. On one page, the goddess Chakchel overturns a jar of water, drowning the world, while above her blazes a star-like glyph interpreted by many scholars as a comet. Another passage depicts serpentine beings descending from the heavens, their fiery breath raining destruction upon the earth. Scholars debate whether these images represent mythological cycles, actual cometary events, or a fusion of both. To the Maya, there was no separation. The arrival of a comet was the return of the sky serpent, written into both prophecy and experience. The Madrid Codex also contains images of serpents with star glyphs woven into their bodies, slithering across cosmic bands. These are often interpreted as depictions of comets, with their writhing tails mimicking the curling flames that spread across the night sky. The serpent, a symbol of transformation and chaos, was a natural metaphor for such a celestial intruder. To see the sky itself open with a burning serpent was to witness the unraveling of cosmic order. Priests would have rushed to temples performing bloodletting rituals to appease the gods, fearing that the serpent's return signaled the end of a cycle and the collapse of kingdoms. And collapse did come. Mayan history is marked by sudden declines, great cities like Tikal and Copan abandoned, dynasties extinguished. Archaeologists link these collapses to drought, famine, and warfare, but the Maya themselves likely saw them as the fulfillment of cosmic prophecy. Comets, appearing during times of crisis, became woven into the story. The sky serpent returned when kings fell, when fields withered, when the calendar turned toward destruction. In Mayan lore, history itself was cyclical. So too was the serpent's fiery descent. Each return was both an end and a beginning. One particularly evocative Mayan phrase translates as, "the star with a smoking tail that returns not again." This unusual wording suggests that the Maya may have distinguished between ordinary comets, which reappeared in cycles, and rare one-time visitors. Could they have witnessed something akin to 3I Atlas, an interstellar comet that blazed across the heavens once in eternity and then was gone? If so, the memory of its singular brilliance may have been immortalized in prophecy, the serpent that came from beyond the known skies, never to be seen again but forever feared as a harbinger of change. The sky serpent was not only destruction. In many Mayan myths, Kukulkan descended from the heavens to bring knowledge, law, and renewal. The serpent was both creator and destroyer, its fiery form embodying transformation. This duality aligns uncannily with the reality of comets. They are harbingers of doom in folklore, yet in modern science, they are carriers of cosmic material, water, organic molecules, the seeds of life itself. For the Maya, the serpent's return could cleanse and renew, even as it destroyed. Dynasties might fall, but from the ashes would rise new kingdoms under new rulers, blessed by the same fiery messenger that ended the old. Rituals surrounding comets further reveal their importance. Archaeological evidence suggests that Mayan priests performed human sacrifices during celestial anomalies, especially those linked with serpentine imagery. At Chichen Itza, the Temple of Kukulkan is aligned with celestial events, and some scholars believe its design may echo cometary appearances, serpents of light undulating down the steps during equinox sunsets. If comets inspired architecture, myth, and blood ritual, then their influence on the Mayan imagination was immense. The Serpent of Fire was not just a myth, it was a tangible force shaping the very foundations of society. When Spanish chroniclers arrived in the New World, they recorded indigenous stories of fiery omens that preceded conquest. One Aztec account speaks of a blazing, smoking star that appeared before Hernán Cortés's arrival, interpreted as the return of Quetzalcoatl. While this is Aztec, not Mayan, the cultural continuity is clear. Across Mesoamerica, the fiery star serpent was tied to upheaval, invasion, and the fall of empires. It was the cosmic stage upon which human history unfolded. The Mayan codices, though fragmentary, preserve this worldview in vivid images: serpents, fire, water, death, and rebirth. Modern astronomers studying 3 Atlas marvel at its fleeting brilliance and its singular trajectory. It came from the void, not bound to return, blazing briefly before disappearing forever. To imagine such an event in Mayan times is to see why the serpent loomed so large in their myths. How else would they describe an interstellar visitor but as a fiery serpent, a god returning from beyond the stars? And how else would they interpret its vanishing but as the fulfillment of prophecy, that the serpent comes only when the world is about to change? The codices, fragile survivors of conquest and fire, give us only fragments of this ancient knowledge. Yet in their serpents and smoking stars, we glimpse a worldview that saw the cosmos as alive, speaking to humanity through fiery signs. The Maya did not fear the sky serpent as an accident of nature. They revered it as destiny, as prophecy written across the heavens, as the cosmic judge of kings and kingdoms. Its return was inevitable, its message final, and so the mystery persists. Were the Mayan records of the sky serpent descriptions of ordinary comets magnified into myth? Or were they the memory of something rarer, a one-time visitor like 3I Atlas that left such an impression it became immortalized in prophecy? We cannot know. What we do know is that the Maya, like all ancient peoples, listened to the heavens for signs, and when the Serpent of Fire appeared, they inscribed its meaning into their sacred books. The codices whisper still. The serpent will return, and with it, the world will change. The Norse sagas of the fiery whale in the heavens. In the windswept north, where long winters cloak the land in darkness and the aurora dances like green fire above frozen seas, the Norse people look to the skies for omens. Their myths, carried on the tongues of skalds and preserved in sagas, tell of gods, giants, and monstrous beasts that shaped the fates of men. Among these tales are stranger fragments, accounts of a fiery whale that streaked across the heavens, blazing like a ship aflame as it swam the starry sea. Unlike the familiar constellations or the cycles of the moon, this fiery apparition was unpredictable, arriving without warning, burning brightly, and then vanishing into the void. To the Norse, this was no ordinary star. It was a beast of the sky, an omen of doom, and perhaps in modern terms a memory of an interstellar visitor like Comet 3 Atlas. The Norse were seafarers, and the whale was both a creature of dread and reverence. The sagas speak of Hafgufa, a monstrous whale so vast it could be mistaken for an island, luring sailors to their deaths. To imagine such a creature transposed onto the night sky was natural for a culture that measured existence by voyages across perilous seas. The fiery whale described in the sagas was said to swim across the heavens, trailing sparks and smoke like a burning ship upon the waves. Its body was blazing, its tail stretched long, curling like fire across the night. To modern eyes, these are the unmistakable features of a comet: the glowing nucleus, the fiery tail, the impression of motion through the sky. One saga, though fragmentary, describes a winter night when farmers and sailors alike saw a whale of flame in the heavens swimming northward with sparks from its tail. Soon after, storms ravaged the coasts and harvests failed. Another recounts the appearance of a whale star before the death of a great king, its fiery passage interpreted as the sky's herald of coming chaos. Just as comets were feared as omens in Greece, Rome, and China, the Norse too linked these fiery visitors with the fall of leaders and the approach of doom. In a world governed by fate, word, and bound to the prophecy of Ragnarok, such omens were not ignored. The image of a whale is particularly striking. Unlike serpents, which are common symbols for comets in other cultures, the Norse chose a creature of the sea. This choice reveals their maritime identity. The cosmos itself was imagined as an ocean. Ymir's blood formed the seas, Jörmungandr encircled the world, and the stars were lights upon the waves of the firmament. A comet blazing across the night would have seemed like a fiery whale breaching the cosmic sea, a monstrous traveler whose passage threatened the order of the gods. Its fiery trail resembled the wake of a ship or the spray of a whale's spout, but now transmuted into fire. The Voluspa, the great prophecy poem of the Poetic Edda, may contain echoes of this imagery. The seeress speaks of fire that comes from above, consuming the world tree, and stars falling into the sea. Some scholars argue this is purely mythological, but others suggest it preserves cultural memory of unusual celestial phenomena, comets, meteors, or even interstellar wanderers. The fiery whale, swimming above, may have been part of this tapestry, a reminder that the cosmos was not fixed, but alive, with sudden, terrifying intrusions. To the Norse, each fiery sign in the sky was woven into the greater prophecy of Ragnarok, the end of the gods, when the heavens themselves would burn. There are also practical echoes. Seafarers navigating by stars would have been acutely aware of any disruption in the night sky. A blazing comet might have disoriented sailors, its brilliance outshining familiar constellations used for navigation. To see such a beast devouring the stars could only mean danger. Sagas sometimes describe ships lost at sea after such omens, reinforcing the belief that the fiery whale brought ruin not only to kings but to ordinary men who braved the ocean's edge. The Norse world was precarious, balanced between sea, ice, and storm. A comet blazing above only confirmed the sense that disaster was always near. Modern astronomers, looking back, know that comets are icy bodies, often arriving in long orbits, sometimes blazing close to Earth before retreating to the depths of space. But some comets, like 3I Atlas, are not bound to return. They come from beyond, interstellar wanderers passing once through our skies. To the Norse, who saw fate as inescapable, such a singular visitor would have been even more ominous. A whale that swam once and vanished could be remembered not as a recurring sign, but as a singular herald of change. The sagas, oral for generations before being written, may preserve the memory of such an extraordinary event, reinterpreted through myth and metaphor. The connection between fiery omens and dynastic upheaval is also strong in Norse lore. Before the fall of great kings, comets or strange lights are sometimes mentioned. One saga tells of Harald Hardrada, the warrior king of Norway, whose last campaign ended in death at Stamford Bridge in 1066. Chroniclers note that strange stars and fiery signs were seen before his final battle. Though not all explicitly describe the fiery whale, the association between blazing visitors and the downfall of rulers remained consistent. Just as in Egypt and Mesopotamia, the Norse wove celestial fire into the destiny of kings. The fiery whale also fits into the larger cosmology of monstrous beasts. The Norse feared the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, who encircled the world, Fenrir, the wolf who would devour the sun, and Surtur, the fire giant who would set the world aflame. The whale, too, was a beast of chaos, swallowing ships and dragging sailors to the depths. To see its fiery image in the heavens was to see the mythology reflected above. The cosmos itself seemed to warn that the beasts of Ragnarok were stirring, that the final battle between gods and giants was approaching. A comet was not just a celestial body, it was a cosmic beast, a living omen. Even the language of the sagas supports this. Words for comets in Old Norse sometimes use terms like eldfisk, firefish, or eldval, fire whale. These are not cold scientific terms, but vivid, living metaphors. The comet was alive, swimming through the cosmic sea, devouring stars as it passed. This personification reflects the deep Norse tendency to animate nature, to see in every storm and wave the presence of a god or giant. The comet was no exception. It was alive, and its fiery passage was part of the saga of gods and men alike. To modern eyes, the fiery whale may seem like mere poetic exaggeration, but to the Norse, it was a reality etched into memory. When a comet blazed across the night, it was seen, remembered, and retold. In time, it became woven into the fabric of their myth, preserved as a beast swimming the starry seas. And just as the serpent in Mayan lore or the fire star in Sumerian texts, the whale in Norse skies was remembered as a herald of collapse, a messenger of doom. Today, when we track comets with telescopes, charting their orbits across centuries, we can separate myth from science. Yet when we watch interstellar comets like 3I Atlas blaze briefly before vanishing forever, we cannot help but hear the echoes of those ancient voices. The Norse, standing on fjords beneath dark northern skies, saw the same fiery visitors and gave them names, stories, and meaning. To them, the heavens were not empty. They were alive with whales of fire, serpents of chaos, and omens of fate. The fiery whale may never return, but its memory swims still in the sagas, a reminder that when the heavens blaze, the fates of men and gods alike hang in the balance. The Hopi blue star Kachina and the end of worlds. In the high deserts of the American Southwest, the Hopi people have preserved one of the most intricate and enduring cosmologies of any indigenous culture in North America. Their traditions speak of multiple worlds, cycles of creation and destruction through which humanity has passed, guided each time by spiritual beings known as Kachinas. Among these prophecies, one stands out for its haunting imagery: the coming of the blue star Kachina, a celestial being who will appear in the heavens at the end of the fourth world to signal the birth of the fifth. To the Hopi, this is no mere legend, but a sacred warning. The sky itself, they believe, will blaze with a star of blue fire before the world as we know it ends. When modern astronomers discovered interstellar wanderers like Comet 3I Atlas, fiery intruders from beyond our solar system that blaze across the sky once before vanishing forever, some could not help but see echoes of this prophecy. Was the blue star Kachina a metaphorical vision of such a cosmic visitor, a blazing comet or star whose appearance marks the breaking of worlds? The Hopi concept of cyclical worlds is central to their prophecy. According to their teachings, humanity has already lived through 3 worlds, each destroyed because of corruption, greed, and imbalance. The first world was destroyed by fire, the second by ice, and the third by flood. The Hopi say we live now in the 4th world, a fragile era destined one day to end. When it does, a new cycle will begin, the 5th world, born in fire and renewal. At the threshold of this transition, the blue star Kachina will appear. It will dance in the plaza of the Hopi villages, revealing itself first in the heavens as a star or comet, a celestial messenger visible to all nations. Accounts from Hopi elders describe the blue star Kachina as both a being and a sign. Some identify it as Sakwasohu, a spirit dancer who will remove his mask during the last great ceremony, symbolizing the end of all illusions. Others emphasize its physical manifestation as a star-like object blazing in the sky, glowing blue, sudden and undeniable. For a people who have lived for centuries beneath wide desert skies, such a vision is no abstraction. The Hopi are master skywatchers, reading the heavens for agricultural cycles, ceremonies, and omens. A sudden blue star, unfamiliar and unbounded, would be interpreted not as a natural anomaly, but as the fulfillment of prophecy. It is important to note that the Hopi do not see the blue star Kachina solely as a destroyer. Like many cosmic omens across cultures, it embodies both destruction and renewal. Its appearance will mean that the world as it exists has become corrupt and unsustainable, but also that a new world is ready to emerge. The comet, star, or fiery visitor is thus not just an omen of doom, but a midwife of transformation, clearing the way for a new balance between humans, nature, and spirit. In this duality, the Hopi prophecy resonates with Mayan visions of the sky serpent and Norse prophecies of Ragnarok. Cosmic fire is terrifying, but it is also the spark of renewal. The description of the blue star Kachina has fascinated modern interpreters because of its striking similarity to the appearance of certain comets or interstellar objects. When 3I Atlas was detected, it was described in news reports as a bright, greenish-blue object visible to telescopes as it streaked toward the inner solar system. It disintegrated before becoming visible to the naked eye, but the symbolism struck many observers. Here was a blue star, a stranger from beyond, appearing once before vanishing forever. While astronomers analyze its composition in terms of ice, dust, and organic molecules, Hopi prophecy frames such an event in terms of spiritual consequence. Science measures its orbit, prophecy measures its meaning. The Hopi tradition warns that before the blue star Kachina's full appearance, there will be signs. One version of the prophecy says that the dwelling place in the heavens shall fall with a great crash, which some have connected to the appearance of satellites or space stations in the modern age. Others speak of red stars and blackened skies, of fires in distant lands, and a great purification that will sweep across the world. While interpretations vary, the essence remains. The heavens will signal the end of the cycle, and the appearance of a fiery star-like being will mark the final threshold. The ceremony of the Kachinas, in which masked dancers embody spirit beings, is an essential part of Hopi life. The prophecy imagines the blue star Kachina as participating in this dance, removing his mask before all people. This act is symbolic. The mask conceals truth, but its removal signifies revelation. When the blue star appears, the world's illusions, its false wealth, its corrupt powers, its unsustainable ways, will be stripped bare. The world will see itself as it truly is, and in that moment of revelation, the cycle will end. A comet blazing across the night sky, undeniable in its brilliance, would serve as such a revelation, a cosmic mask removed before all eyes. Some elders describe the blue star as a companion to a red star Kachina, another celestial being whose appearance will follow, bringing the final purification. The red star, they say, will cause the earth to shake, the rivers to change course, and the skies to burn. In this sequence, the blue star is the herald, the messenger who announces the end, while the red star brings the destruction itself. Whether understood literally or symbolically, the imagery speaks to a profound awareness of cosmic cycles, of how the heavens and the earth are bound in shared destiny. The Hopi blue star prophecy also speaks to a truth that resonates beyond its cultural boundaries, that human civilizations rise and fall, that imbalance brings collapse, and that cosmic forces remind us of our fragility. A comet, blazing briefly across the sky, embodies that truth. It is beautiful, terrifying, and fleeting, just as human power is. It cannot be controlled, only witnessed, and in witnessing it, people are reminded of forces greater than themselves. To the Hopi, such a moment is not random. It is the appointed time when the old world ends and the new begins. For centuries, Hopi elders have shared this prophecy not as a threat, but as a teaching. It is not meant to instill fear, but to encourage balance, humility, and preparation. The blue star Kachina will appear when humanity has strayed too far, when the world is consumed by greed and conflict. Its arrival will be inevitable, but whether the transition is violent or gentle depends on how people respond. In this way, the prophecy is both a warning and a guide. Live in balance with the earth, honor the cycles of nature, and the fifth world will be born in harmony rather than fire. Today, as telescopes peer into the depths of space and detect new comets and interstellar wanderers, the Hopi prophecy feels more relevant than ever. We know now that objects like 3I Atlas enter our solar system from beyond, blazing briefly before vanishing into the dark. We understand their chemistry, their trajectories, their origins in interstellar ice and dust. Yet, for all our knowledge, we cannot help but feel awe when they appear. The ancients saw in them prophecy, we see in them science. Perhaps both are true. The fiery star is not only a ball of ice, it is also a mirror reflecting humanity's fear, hope, and destiny. The blue star Kachina remains one of the most haunting prophecies of the Hopi. It tells of endings and beginnings, of stars blazing blue against the night, of masks removed and truths revealed. Whether it refers to an actual comet, a symbolic vision, or an interstellar visitor like 3 Atlas, its message endures. The cosmos speaks, and when it does, it changes the world. The Hopi remind us that we live not in isolation, but within cycles, that the heavens and the earth move together, and that when the blue star appears, we will know that the end of the fourth world has come, and the fifth is about to dawn. The Chinese records of the Broom Star that never returned. For thousands of years, Chinese astronomers gazed at the heavens with unmatched diligence, recording every star, eclipse, and comet with careful precision. The ancient Chinese believed that the sky was a great mirror of earthly affairs. A stable cosmos reflected a stable empire, while sudden changes in the heavens were signs that dynasties stood on the brink of collapse. Among the celestial intruders they observed, none were more feared than the Broom Stars, comets whose glowing tails stretched across the sky like a sweeping brush. In Chinese thought, these stars were cosmic omens, sweeping away emperors and kingdoms, cleansing the stage for what was to come. Most Broom Stars appeared again in cycles, their returns documented across centuries. But in the annals of Chinese astronomy, there are cryptic references to a Broom Star that never returned, a singular fiery apparition that blazed once in the heavens and vanished forever. To modern eyes, this may be a tantalizing echo of an interstellar visitor, like Comet 3 Atlas, a cosmic stranger whose path through our skies was a fleeting moment in eternity. The earliest Chinese records of Broom Stars appear in the Book of Odes and the Bamboo Annals, dating back nearly 3,000 years. These accounts describe sudden stars with long tails like a banner in the sky. Later, the meticulous records of the Han Dynasty's Book of Han and subsequent dynastic histories preserve detailed comet sightings, noting their direction, duration, and appearance. No other ancient culture tracked comets with such continuity. The Chinese distinguished between guest stars, novae or supernovae that appeared suddenly and then faded, and broom stars, which moved across the heavens, trailing fiery tails. For them, each comet was not a natural phenomenon, but a direct message from the heavens to the emperor. One famous text from the Tang Dynasty describes a broom star that appeared with a blue flame, its tail stretching across the northern sky. Court astrologers warned the emperor that this sign meant upheaval and bloodshed. Within years, rebellions and wars shattered the dynasty's stability. The comet was remembered as a harbinger of chaos, yet the record also notes something curious. The star did not return. In contrast to Halley's Comet, which Chinese astronomers recorded on multiple occasions and recognized as a repeating visitor, this fiery broom was seen once and never again. To the scholars of the court, it was a singular omen, a comet outside the cycles of heaven. The language used to describe this unusual broom star is striking. One record says it came from beyond the stars of the north and returned not to its place. Another says it burned with fire yet did not diminish and vanished into emptiness. These words suggest not a cyclic comet bound to return, but an intruder on a one-way journey. Modern astronomers now know that interstellar comets like 3 Atlas travel on hyperbolic paths, never to circle back. Could the Chinese have witnessed such an event centuries ago, recording it as the broom star that never returned? In Chinese cosmology, the sudden appearance of a comet had profound consequences. The emperor, as the son of heaven, was expected to maintain harmony between heaven and earth. When a broom star appeared, it was interpreted as a sign that this harmony had been broken. Dynasties often responded with rituals of appeasement, mass pardons, or reforms to demonstrate that the ruler was heeding heaven's warning. In some cases, emperors grew paranoid, fearing that the broom star's appearance signaled their imminent death. When the mysterious, non-returning broom star was seen, it would have been viewed as an especially dire omen, an intruder from beyond the known heavens, sweeping away not just a reign, but perhaps an entire cycle of history. There is evidence that the broom star coincided with moments of collapse. During the late Han Dynasty, records speak of famine, rebellion, and the weakening of imperial authority following the sighting of a particularly bright broom star. Some historians believe this may have been Halley's comet. Yet others point to a separate account of a broom star described as without ancestor and without descendant, a poetic way of saying it had no prior record and no return. This unique phrasing suggests something beyond the ordinary cycles of Halley or other known comets, something singular that Chinese astronomers found impossible to categorize. The broom star that never returned also inspired mythological interpretations. Some Taoist texts describe fiery visitors as dragons of the sky, their tails lashing across the heavens. Others saw them as divine brooms, sweeping away corruption. A comet that never returned might have been interpreted as a cosmic executioner, sent once by the heavens to cleanse the earth before vanishing back into the void. The imagery of sweeping is central. The broom star swept the skies, and with it swept away kings, cities, and dynasties. Its vanishing reinforced its role as a singular, unrepeatable event, an act of heaven that needed no repetition. Modern astronomers reviewing Chinese records have been astonished by their accuracy. Descriptions of comets match known orbital returns, and the timing of Halley's comet's passages can be confirmed in dynastic histories stretching back centuries. This makes the outlier, the broom star that never returned, all the more intriguing. If the Chinese tracked cyclical comets so carefully, why record one that they explicitly noted never came back? Unless, of course, it truly was something outside the cycles of the solar system. The notion that they may have observed an interstellar comet is not far-fetched. After all, 3I Atlas and its predecessor 1I Oumuamua have shown us that such visitors are real, passing through our skies briefly before leaving forever. The fear these stars inspired cannot be overstated. Chinese chronicles repeatedly note disasters following broom stars, floods, droughts, invasions, assassinations. The broom star that never returned must have struck even deeper terror. If ordinary comets signaled temporary upheaval, what did a singular visitor portend? Perhaps it meant not just the fall of a dynasty, but the end of an age. In the minds of court astrologers, this fiery stranger from beyond could only be a sign of radical transformation, the sweeping away of a world order itself. Some later poets romanticized the event. In verses from the Song Dynasty, a poet reflects on the broom star that burned and vanished, a herald of endings beyond the emperor's power. To him, the comet symbolized the impermanence of all things, the futility of power before the vastness of the cosmos. The star was not just an omen, but a lesson. All dynasties fall, all empires fade, as fleeting as a fiery visitor that passes once through the night. What makes this mystery so compelling is the blend of science and prophecy. The Chinese astronomers were scientists in their own right, carefully documenting what they saw. Yet their records are inseparable from interpretation, from the belief that heaven spoke through the stars. The broom star that never returned was both a physical phenomenon and a divine message. Today, we can analyze such records in terms of orbital mechanics and interstellar trajectories, but the awe remains the same. The Chinese saw in that fiery broom the hand of heaven itself, sweeping across the sky and across history. And so the question lingers. Did the Chinese truly witness an interstellar comet blazing across the skies centuries ago, leaving only a line in their chronicles as evidence of its passage? Or was it a particularly bright ordinary comet that was simply misidentified as singular? We may never know. But the records speak with haunting clarity. There was a broom star. It appeared once, it never returned, and in its wake, dynasties trembled. To this day, the mystery of the Broom Star that vanished into the void endures, reminding us that even the most meticulous astronomers of the past could not always explain what they saw, only record it and fear what it meant. The Hebrew accounts of fiery messengers before great disasters. In the scriptures and traditions of the Hebrew people, the heavens were not distant or silent. They were alive with the voice of God, constantly sending signs to guide, to warn, and to judge. Lightning, storms, and eclipses were woven into prophetic language, yet there are also references, scattered through biblical texts and later Jewish writings, of fiery messengers streaking across the sky before moments of catastrophe. To a people who believed their covenant bound heaven and earth together, these fiery intruders were not mere celestial accidents. They were messages, dispatched in flame, heralding disaster and divine judgment. Some of these accounts bear a striking resemblance to descriptions of comets or interstellar visitors, blazing suddenly across the night and vanishing forever, much like modern encounters with Three-Eye Atlas. The Hebrew scriptures repeatedly use the imagery of fire to describe divine presence and warning. God appears to Moses in a burning bush that is not consumed. A pillar of fire leads the Israelites by night through the wilderness. Fire descends upon Mount Sinai as the Ten Commandments are given. Fire in these traditions is both revelation and judgment. It illuminates the path for the faithful, but consumes those who stray. Against this backdrop, reports of fiery lights in the heavens carried immense weight. They were not anonymous stars. They were messengers, dispatched by God to announce what was to come. One of the most vivid passages comes from the book of Joel, which warns of a great and terrible day of the Lord. The prophet describes wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. Though often interpreted as poetic apocalyptic imagery, some scholars have suggested that Joel's wonders in the heavens may include cometary apparitions or fiery meteors. A blazing comet with a long tail staining the sky with strange colors could easily have been remembered as a pillar of smoke or a fiery messenger. The Book of Amos similarly records, "I will cause the sun to go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in the clear day." This is often linked to an eclipse, but some Jewish commentators associated it with other celestial phenomena, signs of disaster about to fall on Israel. The prophets consistently used fiery signs in the heavens as portents of judgment, that linking them to invasions, famines, and national calamities. When Babylonian armies destroyed Jerusalem, chroniclers remembered it as a disaster that had been foretold in the skies. Later traditions, preserved in the Talmud and Midrash, elaborate on these themes. One Midrashic passage speaks of fiery arrows that streaked through the sky before the destruction of the first temple. Another describes a star of flame that appeared before great wars, its tail stretching across the heavens as a sign that nations would soon fall. The rabbis debated whether these were literal stars or symbolic visions, but their fear was the same. When the heavens blazed, disaster was near. The notion of fiery messengers became part of the moral fabric of Jewish teaching, signs of divine displeasure, warnings to repent before it was too late. The most chilling connection between fiery signs and disaster comes in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. In Genesis, the cities are destroyed by fire and brimstone from the Lord out of heaven. Some interpreters view this as a volcanic eruption or meteor strike. Ancient Jewish commentaries describe the destruction as preceded by fiery signs in the sky, flaming messengers that warned of the city's impending doom. Whether these were meteors, comets, or simply prophetic visions, the link between fiery visitors and sudden catastrophe became cemented in memory. The destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE also gave rise to accounts of celestial omens. The Jewish historian Josephus, though writing in Greek for a Roman audience, records that a star resembling a sword hung over Jerusalem for a year before the city's fall, and that a comet appeared as a sign of doom. This fiery sword in the heavens was remembered as a messenger of disaster, foretelling the Roman siege and the temple's destruction. For the people of Jerusalem, the comet was no natural accident. It was a herald of catastrophe, dispatched by heaven itself. What is striking is how often these fiery messengers are described as singular and unrepeatable. Unlike cyclical stars, they blaze suddenly and then vanish forever. Their message delivered, their presence no longer required. This echoes the peculiar path of interstellar comets like 3 Atlas, one-time visitors burning briefly in our skies before disappearing into the void. To ancient Hebrew eyes, such a singular star could only be an angel of fire, a divine messenger carrying warning from beyond the known cosmos. The Hebrew language itself reinforces this imagery. The word malach means messenger and is often used for angels. But in poetic and prophetic texts, stars themselves can serve as angels, their sudden movements interpreted as messages. The fiery stars, comets, or meteors blazing across the heavens were seen as malachim of flame, dispatched by God not to comfort but to warn. They were transient, terrifying, and impossible to ignore, perfect vehicles for prophecy. Another layer of meaning comes from apocalyptic literature, such as the Book of Enoch. In this text, stars are described as living beings, some of whom fell from heaven in rebellion. Fiery stars are depicted as angels bound for judgment, their flames a punishment for their disobedience. Within this worldview, a fiery comet or blazing messenger before disaster could be understood not only as a warning, but as a fallen angel carrying destruction with it. The heavens were alive with beings of fire, and their appearance was bound to catastrophe. Later Jewish mystics carried these themes forward. The Zohar, the great work of Kabbalah, describes fiery stars that appear before times of great upheaval. It speaks of a blazing star in the east before war, of arrows of fire across the sky before plagues. These were not abstractions, they were signs that the cosmos itself was responding to human corruption. In mystical thought, heaven and earth were bound in a web of cause and effect, and fiery messengers were the visible threads connecting judgment above with disaster below. Modern readers may be tempted to interpret all this as superstition, but there is a deeper resonance. For people without telescopes, a comet blazing across the sky was incomprehensible, terrifying, and unforgettable. It was not part of the regular order. It did not behave like the moon, the sun, or the planets. It came from beyond, intruding suddenly and vanishing forever. Its very strangeness demanded explanation, and for the Hebrews, the explanation was clear. It was a messenger from God, announcing that disaster was near. The mystery lies in whether some of these accounts record genuine observations of rare comets or interstellar visitors. Josephus's star resembling a sword could describe a comet with a long, glowing tail. The Midrashic fiery arrows may have been meteor showers. The star that never returned, remembered as a herald of destruction, might even have been an interstellar comet blazing briefly before vanishing forever. If so, then Hebrew accounts preserve not just prophecy, but astronomical memory, ancient witnesses to cosmic visitors as strange as 3i Atlas. Ultimately, the Hebrew accounts of fiery messengers remind us of a truth that transcends cultures. When the heavens blaze, humanity sees not only light, but meaning. For the Hebrews, fiery stars were not accidents of ice and dust. They were messengers of flame, dispatched before great disasters to call people back to righteousness. Whether real comets or prophetic visions, their message was the same. The world is fragile, judgment is near, and heaven speaks in fire before catastrophe descends. The Zoroastrian prophecy of the star that heralds renewal. In the high plateaus of ancient Persia, where fire temples burned with eternal flames and priests kept watch over the heavens, Zoroastrianism emerged as one of the world's oldest prophetic religions. Founded by the prophet Zarathustra, Zoroaster, it envisioned history not as an endless cycle, but as a cosmic struggle with a destined conclusion. Time, in Zoroastrian teaching, unfolds in ages, each moving toward the final renovation of the world, the Frashokereti, when evil will be destroyed and creation renewed in perfection. Central to this vision is a celestial sign, a fiery star, a messenger of the divine, that will blaze in the heavens to herald the coming of the Savior and the dawn of the final age. This star of renewal is one of the most haunting prophecies in ancient Persian lore, an omen that resonates with the mystery of comets and interstellar wanderers like 3i Atlas. The Zoroastrian scriptures, preserved in the Avesta and later Middle Persian texts, repeatedly emphasize the cosmic role of stars. The universe, they taught, was a battlefield between Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, and Angra Mainyu, the spirit of chaos. Every visible star was a soldier of order, every blazing light in the heavens a weapon in the fight against darkness. But among these stars, one was foretold to appear in the final age, a star unlike any other, the Herald of Renewal. One text, the Bundahishn, a cosmological commentary, speaks of a star that shines at the appointed time to announce the birth of the Saoshyant, the savior who will lead humanity through the last battle. Another describes a fiery star appearing in the east, visible to all nations, blazing so brightly that it cannot be ignored. Priests and kings, it was said, would see this star and know that history itself was about to change. Unlike the fixed constellations or the predictable cycles of the moon, this star was singular, untethered to ordinary patterns. It was the messenger of destiny. To the ancient Persians, comets and fiery intruders were deeply unsettling. The Avesta describes how the forces of Angra Mainyu unleash stinking stars and fiery darts against the earth, symbols of corruption and chaos. Yet it also affirms that Ahura Mazda uses stars as his own messengers. In this duality, a comet blazing across the sky could be either a weapon of evil or a herald of hope, depending on its timing. The Star of Renewal was the latter, a comet-like apparition that did not destroy but signaled that destruction itself was about to end. It was both a fiery messenger and a promise of salvation. The image of a blazing star heralding the Savior echoes throughout later Zoroastrian writings. The Zandi Vohuman-Yasht, a prophetic text, speaks of a great star that appears in the final millennium, seen by kings and commoners alike. It describes turmoil, war, and famine leading up to the event, followed by the sudden appearance of the star. Soon after, the Saoshyant would be revealed, leading the righteous in the battle that ends the age of evil. The heavens themselves, it was said, would proclaim his coming through this fiery messenger. What makes these prophecies remarkable is their description of the star as a singular, one-time visitor. Unlike ordinary stars or cyclical comets, it is not said to appear repeatedly. It arrives once at the appointed time, and its message is final. This resonates uncannily with modern knowledge of interstellar comets like 3I Atlas, which blaze across the sky once before vanishing into the galactic void. To the priests who preserved these traditions, such a star would have seemed supernatural, outside the regular cycles of creation, an alien messenger whose very strangeness confirmed its role in divine prophecy. The Persian worldview was steeped in the idea of renewal through fire. At the end of time, Zoroastrian texts describe the earth being cleansed by molten metal, through which all humanity must pass. The righteous will emerge purified, the wicked will be destroyed, and creation will be made new. The Star of Renewal, blazing across the heavens, was the fiery herald of this cosmic fire. It announced not only the coming of the Savior, but also the cleansing of the world. A comet, with its blazing nucleus and streaming tail, would have been the perfect symbol of this purifying flame streaking across the sky. Historical records suggest that comets and bright celestial events were indeed taken seriously by Persian astrologer priests. During the reign of Darius and Xerxes, chronicles note fiery apparitions in the sky that were interpreted as omens of victory or disaster. In later Sasanian times, records speak of stars that blazed unusually bright, sparking religious rituals of purification. Whether these were ordinary comets, nova, or something rarer, they reinforced the association between fiery visitors and destiny. The prophecies of the Star of Renewal were not abstract. They were grounded in lived experience of fiery messengers that appeared unpredictably, reminding humanity of cosmic forces beyond their control. The dual nature of fiery stars also mattered. Zoroastrianism was a religion of stark dualities, light and dark, truth and lie, good and evil. Comets embodied this tension. They could be instruments of Angra Mainyu, spreading fear and plague, but the prophecy of the Star of Renewal transformed the image, showing that fire in the heavens could also be a sign of ultimate hope. It was the same fire, but with opposite meaning, depending on whether it came in chaos or at the destined moment. This tension preserved the comet's aura of awe. No one could know whether a blazing star meant doom or redemption until the prophecy was fulfilled. Later cultures influenced by Zoroastrian thought also preserved echoes of the Star of Renewal. Early Christian writers in the East may have been influenced by Persian prophecy when they described the Star of Bethlehem guiding the Magi, who themselves were Persian priest astrologers. Some scholars suggest that the story of a singular star heralding the birth of a savior echoes directly from Zoroastrian tradition. In this view, the Christian nativity star and the Zoroastrian star of renewal are twin motifs, both expressing the belief that heaven sends a fiery messenger to mark history's turning point. What fascinates modern interpreters is how closely these prophecies align with what we now know of interstellar visitors. An ordinary comet returns in cycles, bound by the sun's gravity. But an interstellar comet like 3I Atlas appears once and never again, blazing briefly before vanishing forever. To an ancient priest watching the heavens, such a one-time star would have seemed supernatural, the very definition of a herald that returns not again. In this light, the Zoroastrian prophecy takes on a new dimension. Perhaps it preserved memory of an ancient encounter with such a visitor, or perhaps it anticipated the awe such a phenomenon would inspire. The Star of Renewal is not just a prophecy of fire, but of transformation. Its appearance is terrifying, but its message is hopeful. The world will not end in chaos, but in cleansing and renewal. The righteous will see the star and know that their suffering is nearly over. The wicked will tremble, knowing their end is near. For all, the fiery messenger is a sign that history has reached its appointed moment. To a faith that believed in ultimate order, triumphing over chaos, such a star was the perfect symbol. Bright, sudden, undeniable, and final. And so the mystery endures. Was the Zoroastrian Star of Renewal a mythic vision, a poetic metaphor for divine intervention? Or was it inspired by real celestial events, bright comets, novae, or even interstellar visitors like 3 Atlas that left their mark on Persian memory? We cannot know. But what is clear is that for the Zoroastrians, the heavens were not silent. They spoke in fire, and one day, a fiery star would blaze to announce the end of the struggle and the renewal of the world. The prophecy waits still, echoing across centuries, reminding us that when a singular star blazes across the heavens, it may not only be a comet, it may be the herald of destiny. The lost Atlantean scrolls and the visitor from the void, legends of Atlantis have haunted the imagination of humanity for millennia. First spoken of by Plato, the tale described a mighty island civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, whose power rivaled the greatest empires of the ancient world. It was said to have fallen suddenly, swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of catastrophe. For centuries, scholars debated whether the story was allegory, history, or both. Yet scattered fragments of later tradition hint that the Atlanteans may have preserved strange astronomical knowledge, including scrolls or tablets that spoke of a visitor from the void, a fiery intruder from the heavens that appeared before their downfall. Though the physical scrolls are lost, the echoes of their contents survive in esoteric writings and whispered traditions, tantalizingly connecting Atlantis' destruction with a cosmic omen. The idea of Atlantean scrolls emerged in antiquity. Egyptian priests at Sais, according to Plato, told Solon that the Greeks were children compared to the Atlanteans, who possessed knowledge from a time before history. Later mystics, particularly in Hellenistic Alexandria, claimed that the Atlanteans left records hidden in temples or beneath the sands of Egypt, where their knowledge of the stars was preserved. Among these supposed records was mention of a fire star that came not from the regular heavens, but from beyond, a visitor with no cycle, a herald of catastrophe. Some described it as a serpent of flame, others as a burning ship in the sky. In every version, the visitor was unlike ordinary comets. It appeared once at the appointed time and vanished into the void. If such an account ever existed, what could it have meant? To the Atlanteans, a people imagined as masters of both earth and sky, the sudden intrusion of a fiery wanderer would have been deeply unsettling. Like the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Maya, they may have seen the heavens as ordered, cyclical, predictable. A visitor that broke these cycles would have symbolized chaos entering the cosmos. According to later reconstructions of the Lost Scrolls, the visitor was linked with the destruction of Atlantis itself. Some said its appearance was the final omen, a blazing sign that the empire's time had ended. Others claimed it physically played a role, its fiery tail bringing storms, floods, and earthquakes that swallowed the island. Medieval and Renaissance occultists seized upon these fragments. They wrote of Atlantean wisdom, preserved in scrolls brought to Egypt, where it influenced priestly astronomy. In these retellings, The visitor from the void became a comet-like being whose passage announced the end of ages. Paracelsus, the 16th century physician and mystic, wrote cryptically of stars that are strangers, not born of this firmament, that come but once and bring with them change of worlds. He cited Atlantean tradition as his source, though by then the scrolls themselves were already considered lost. Whether his claim was invention or based on earlier texts, it perpetuated the legend that Atlantis had known of interstellar wanderers. In modern times, when astronomers detected one-eye flutters, Oumuamua in 2017 and three-eye Atlas in 2020, the echoes of these legends resurfaced. Here were real, tangible visitors from beyond the solar system, objects that entered once and never returned, precisely as the Atlantean prophecy described. Though science interprets them as fragments of ice and rock, the symbolic parallel is haunting. If Atlantis had indeed recorded such an event, it would mean they had witnessed something rare and real, an interstellar comet blazing in their skies, remembered as the visitor from the void. Descriptions of the visitor in esoteric writings emphasize its strangeness. Unlike ordinary comets, it was said to glow with shifting colors, sometimes red, sometimes blue, sometimes green. Its tail, long and curling, seemed alive like a serpent writhing in the night. Some claimed it gave off a sound, a low hum that vibrated through the earth. These may be embellishments, that myth layered over memory, but they point to the awe it inspired. For the Atlanteans, who allegedly tied their kingship to the order of the heavens, such a star would have been catastrophic in meaning. It was a sign that order itself had been broken, that the gods had withdrawn their favor. The lost scrolls, according to later accounts, connected the visitor not only with Atlantis' fall, but with cycles of human history. Just as the Maya spoke of worlds ending in fire and flood, so too the Atlanteans were said to have believed in epochs, each ending with catastrophe and renewal. The visitor marked the transition. It came once in each age, a blazing herald of destruction and rebirth. If true, then the comet seen by Atlantis was not only an omen for their own downfall, but a universal sign, a cosmic messenger that would reappear for other civilizations when their time had come. The symbolic weight of such a belief is immense. A comet that appears once and never again, a visitor from beyond the known heavens, becomes the perfect emblem of endings. It is not cyclical, not predictable, not safe. It comes without warning, delivers its message, and disappears forever. To the Atlanteans, this was not chance, it was destiny. The gods had written the fate of empires in the stars, and the visitor from the void was their fiery signature at the end of an age. Modern scholars, skeptical of Atlantis, argue that these stories are myth layered upon myth. The lost scrolls may never have existed, and the visitor may be no more than an allegory for sudden disaster. Yet, even skeptics acknowledge that ancient cultures consistently linked comets with catastrophe. The Sumerian sky wanderer, the Egyptian comet of fire, the Chinese broom star, all tell the same story. When a fiery intruder blazes across the heavens, civilizations tremble. Atlantis, real or imagined, could not escape this universal human fear. Its legend absorbs the comet into its narrative, binding cosmic fire to the story of a lost world. Still, there are tantalizing coincidences. Geological evidence points to sudden cataclysms around the Plato places Atlantis' fall, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and even possible meteor impacts. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, controversial but debated by scientists, suggests that a cometary fragment struck the Earth around 12,000 years ago, triggering floods and climate collapse. Could this have been the visitor from the void, remembered by oral traditions and encoded into myths of Atlantis' destruction? If so, the lost scrolls may have preserved not fantasy but memory, the record of a real cosmic disaster that reshaped the world. The prophecy of the visitor has not faded. In esoteric circles today, some speak of its return, linking it with modern sightings of interstellar objects. The passage of three-eye Atlas, blazing briefly before shattering, has been interpreted by some as a new omen, a sign that another age is ending. While science remains cautious, the resonance is undeniable. The idea of a fiery star from beyond appearing once before vanishing speaks to something primal in human imagination. It is at once terrifying and sacred, a messenger from the deep void reminding us of our fragility. In the end, the mystery of the lost Atlantean scrolls is unsolvable. No physical fragments survive, only whispers in the writings of later ages. Yet the idea they preserve, a civilization warned by a fiery visitor from beyond, is compelling. Whether Atlantis existed or not, the myth tells a truth about humanity. We look to the heavens for meaning, and when the heavens blaze with a singular fire, we hear in it the voice of destiny. The visitor from the void may never be proven, but its story lingers, intertwined with the greatest legend of all, a mighty civilization swallowed by the sea, its wisdom lost, its warnings echoing only in fragments. And perhaps one day, when another interstellar wanderer blazes across our skies, we too will feel what the Atlanteans are said to have felt, that the universe had sent a messenger, and that its fiery tale swept not only across the heavens but across the fate of the world itself. The Roman historians who feared the sky's omen flames. The Romans were, above all, a people of omens. They believed that the will of the gods was written not only in the entrails of sacrificed animals or the flight of birds, but also in the heavens. Celestial events, especially those that broke the harmony of the stars, were read as warnings to emperors and citizens alike. Among these, comets were the most dreaded. The Romans called them stellae crinidae, hairy stars, because their fiery tails resembled disheveled locks streaming across the night sky. But many chroniclers gave them an even darker name, ignes caeli, the flames of heaven. Roman historians carefully recorded these fiery omens, linking them to the deaths of rulers, the outbreak of plagues, and the collapse of empires. To them, these flames were not natural accidents. They were divine messengers, fiery omens announcing disaster. From the earliest annals of the Republic, Roman writers noted appearances of strange fiery bodies in the sky. Livy, the great historian, describes several instances where stars burned by day, or where a torch of fire was seen blazing overhead. During the Second Punic War, when Hannibal threatened Rome itself, records speak of multiple fiery apparitions in the heavens, interpreted as signs of Rome's peril. To a people already fighting for survival, the sky's omen flames confirmed that the gods themselves were testing the fate of the Republic. Later writers, especially during the Empire, drew even stronger connections. Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, devoted an entire section to comets. He cataloged their shapes, some like swords, some like shields, others like spears or torches, and argued that they always signified political change. Never, he wrote, is a comet seen but that it portends a change in the state of things. To Pliny, the flames of heaven were not random at all, they were signals of divine will. He died in the eruption of Vesuvius, itself a fiery omen, and his final writings left behind a powerful testimony of how seriously Romans regarded celestial flames. The most famous comet in Roman history appeared in 44 BCE after the assassination of Julius Caesar. During the games held in Caesar's honor, a brilliant comet blazed for several days, visible even in daylight. The people proclaimed it Caesar's soul ascending to the heavens, and Augustus, his adopted heir, seized the omen to legitimize his rule. Coins were minted bearing the comet as the Sidus Ulium, the Julian star. To the Romans, this was not merely an astronomical curiosity. It was the transformation of a fallen ruler into a fiery god, written in the sky as flames of destiny. Yet while Augustus used the comet as a symbol of renewal, others feared its meaning. Roman historians repeatedly noted that comets appeared before the deaths of emperors. Suetonius, in his Lives of the Caesars, mentions comets blazing before the deaths of Claudius and Vespasian. Tacitus, ever the stern moralist, recorded fiery omens in the heavens as warnings before wars, rebellions, and plagues. The flames of the sky, he wrote, were not ignored in Rome. They were cataloged, debated, and feared. The language Roman historians used is revealing. They often described comets as torches, facsimile, burning spears, or even consuming flames that threatened to set the sky ablaze. These were not neutral observations, but terrifying metaphors. A torch in the heavens meant war. A sword-shaped flame meant the fall of rulers. A blazing shield meant cities would be besieged. The very shape of the comet was thought to dictate the nature of the disaster it heralded. To a Roman reader, the sky itself was sending coded messages in fire. Comets were not the only fiery omens. Roman writers also described bolides or fireballs, meteors streaking suddenly across the sky. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, wrote about these phenomena in his work Natural Questions. While he speculated that comets might be natural celestial bodies, he also admitted that their rarity and unpredictability filled people with dread. Seneca even suggested that comets might be visitors from beyond the known heavens, passing once and never returning. In this, he anticipated modern understanding of interstellar objects like Three-Eye Atlas. To the Romans, such a fiery star would have been the ultimate omen flame, alien, singular, and terrifying. The fear of celestial flames often translated into political action. When a comet appeared, emperors rushed to perform sacrifices, consult augurs, and issue decrees to calm the people. Sometimes they sought to deflect the omen by dedicating temples or holding public games. Augustus cleverly turned Caesar's comet into propaganda, but other emperors dreaded the sight of fiery stars. Nero, paranoid and desperate, is said to have feared a comet so greatly that he offered sacrifices of immense wealth to appease the gods. His reign ended in chaos nonetheless, as if the heavens' warning could not be silenced by gold. Ordinary Romans shared these fears. Inscriptions and graffiti show that comets were spoken of with dread, as signs of pestilence or famine. Farmers believed they foretold bad harvests, soldiers believed they meant wars, and citizens feared they heralded plagues sweeping through the crowded streets of Rome. The flames of heaven were democratic omens. They spoke to emperors and peasants alike, and no one could escape their warning. The destruction of cities was often tied to fiery signs. Before the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 CE, Pliny recorded reports of strange flames and apparitions in the sky. Later writers, looking back, interpreted these as omens of the catastrophe. To the Roman mind, the eruption itself was a fiery omen flame made real, the earth reflecting the heavens in fire and destruction. The boundary between celestial and terrestrial fire was blurred. Both were signs of divine judgment. What makes the Roman accounts so haunting is their consistency. Over centuries, historians, poets, and philosophers all described fiery visitors in the sky as omens of change. Whether they were actual comets, meteor showers, or interstellar wanderers, they were always interpreted as flames of destiny. The Romans did not separate astronomy from religion. To them, a blazing comet was not a neutral body of ice, it was the handwriting of the gods burning across the firmament. Modern astronomers with telescopes and calculations see comets differently. They are fragments of ice and dust, their tails lit by the sun as they approach. Some return in cycles. Others, like Three-Eye Atlas, are interstellar travelers, passing once before vanishing forever. Yet even today, when such visitors appear, people still feel the same awe and unease that the Romans did. The fiery star remains a symbol of endings, of change, of fragility in the face of the cosmos. The Roman historians have left us a legacy of fear and fascination. Their sky's omen flames remind us that humans have always read the heavens for meaning, especially in moments of uncertainty. To them, fiery stars were not distant curiosities. They were intimate messengers of fate, binding the lives of emperors and the destiny of Rome to the movements of the cosmos. The comet was a torch announcing death, a sword promising war, a flame consuming empires. And so the mystery lingers. Were the Romans merely projecting fear onto natural phenomena, or did they witness rare visitors from beyond, fiery messengers like Three Atlas that passed once through history and were never seen again? The answer may never be known, but their words endure, etched in chronicles and stone. When the flames of the sky appear, beware, for the world is about to change. The Polynesian navigators and the stranger star beyond seas, across the vast expanse of the Pacific, Polynesian navigators guided their canoes across thousands of miles of open ocean without maps, compasses, or written charts. They relied on memory, on the swell of waves, the patterns of birds, the flight of fish, and above all, the stars. The night sky was their compass, a living map in which every star had a name and a meaning. For such a culture, the sudden appearance of a new, blazing star was no small thing. It was not simply a curiosity, it was a profound disruption to their cosmic order. Among Polynesian oral traditions, there are accounts of a stranger star, a fiery intruder that appeared once above the seas, so bright and alien that it became a story told for generations. To the Polynesians who tied navigation, time, and even kingship to the heavens, this stranger star was an omen, a messenger, perhaps even a herald of disaster. In modern terms, it may well have been a comet, or even an interstellar visitor like Three-Eye Atlas. The Polynesian voyaging tradition, carried across cultures from Hawaii to Aotearoa, was rooted in an intimate knowledge of the night sky. Navigators memorized star lines, the rising and setting points of stars along the horizon, to steer their canoes across oceans. These constellations were more than practical. They were sacred, bound to myths of gods and ancestors. A star's place in the sky was a sign of cosmic order. To suddenly see a new, blazing star with a long, fiery tail must have felt like an invasion of the heavens themselves. Oral histories describe such events as the arrival of a stranger, a star that did not belong to the familiar family of the night. In Hawaiian traditions, comets were called hoku, ula, red or blazing stars, and were often linked to the rise and fall of chiefs. One chant speaks of a fiery star appearing before the death of a great alii, seen as his soul's torch ascending into the sky. Another tradition tells of a star with a long tail like a canoe's wake, that frightened fishermen who believed it meant storms would come. These accounts resonate with the Roman and Chinese fear of comets, but in Polynesia, the imagery was uniquely maritime. The fiery tail was a wake in the sky, a trail across the cosmic sea. The stranger star was a traveler, like the Polynesians themselves, but one that came from beyond the known horizon. In Samoa and Tonga, legends speak of fiery torches that appeared before wars. Oral stories describe a great star that swam in the sky with fire at its tail, an omen that chiefs interpreted as a call to prepare for conflict. In some cases, comets were even seen as gods or ancestral spirits returning. The stranger star was never neutral. It was always a sign, and it always meant change. For navigators whose lives depended on the stability of the stars, this change was deeply unsettling. The stranger could not be plotted on a star line. It had no fixed rising or setting. It arrived without pattern, left without trace, and unsettled the very logic of the heavens. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, Maori traditions also record comets and fiery stars. One story tells of a star that blazed so brightly it turned night into day, followed by great storms and famine. The people remembered it as a wero, a challenge from the gods. Another tale describes a tailed star that appeared above the horizon as a herald of upheaval. To the Maori, as to other Polynesian peoples, such stars were omens of wakararo, disturbance or disorder. A stranger star meant that the balance of the world had shifted, and the people must prepare for trials ahead. The timing of these cometary traditions is intriguing. Some align with known appearances of Halley's Comet, which was visible across the Pacific in ancient times. Yet others describe singular, unrepeatable stars, ones that came once and never returned. Such phrasing mirrors the Chinese accounts of broom stars that never returned, and the Hebrew tales of fiery messengers that appeared only once before catastrophe. To modern astronomers, this may hint at interstellar comets like 3 Atlas, which passed through the solar system once before vanishing forever. For the Polynesians, the stranger star was precisely that, a stranger, a visitor beyond the family of the sky, whose arrival was unforgettable. The symbolism of the stranger star also fit naturally into Polynesian cosmology. The Polynesians believed that their ancestors had crossed vast seas to settle new islands, guided by stars. The heavens were filled with voyagers too, gods, spirits, and stars that traveled their own paths. A new fiery star was seen as a voyager from beyond, a canoe of fire crossing the celestial ocean. Sometimes it was imagined as a messenger canoe carrying news from the gods. Other times it was feared as a war canoe, bringing destruction in its wake. The stranger was always a traveler, but whether it brought blessings or curses depended on how chiefs and priests interpreted its arrival. Ritual responses often followed. When a stranger star appeared, Polynesian priests, kahuna, tohunga, or taula, performed ceremonies to interpret its meaning. Offerings were made, chants recited, and voyages postponed until the omen was understood. The stranger star could halt exploration itself, grounding canoes until its threat had passed. In societies that lived by voyaging, such disruption was immense. A fiery comet blazing once in a generation could change not only myth, but the practical course of history. European explorers who arrived in the Pacific in the 18th and 19th centuries recorded Polynesian reactions to comets they witnessed together. In 1843, a spectacular comet blazed across the Pacific skies, visible from Tahiti to Hawaii. Missionaries noted that islanders interpreted it as a sign of political upheaval and coming conflict. The old fear of the stranger star persisted even into contact times. For cultures that had crossed the sea guided only by the sky, the heavens could never be mute. They spoke in fire, and the stranger star was their loudest voice. Modern anthropologists see in these traditions the deep intertwining of navigation, cosmology, and prophecy. Polynesians were not naive. They knew the sky with extraordinary detail. They could tell the difference between planets, stars, and seasonal risings. This made the arrival of a comet all the more shocking. It was not ignorance but knowledge that made the stranger star so meaningful. It disrupted a carefully memorized order. It was not part of the map. It was something alien, uncharted from beyond. In this sense, the Polynesian fear of the stranger star parallels our modern reaction to interstellar comets. When One-Eye Oumuamua appeared in 2017, astronomers were astonished. It was elongated, tumbling, and unlike any object we had ever seen. When Three-Eye Atlas blazed into view in 2020, it too was a stranger, a one-time visitor from the void. We named, measured, and analyzed it, but the awe was the same as it had been for the Polynesians. A fiery traveler from beyond had entered our sky. It would never return. And like the islanders staring upward, we could not help but wonder what it meant. The mystery of the stranger star remains unresolved. Did Polynesian navigators truly witness interstellar visitors blazing once and gone forever? Or were their tales rooted in the spectacular but cyclical returns of great comets like Halley's? Either way, the cultural memory preserved in chants and stories tells us how such events were understood. Not as random lights, but as messages, omens, disruptions that shook the foundations of a star-based culture. For the Polynesians, the sea and the sky were mirrors of each other. To cross one was to understand the other. The stranger star, blazing across the celestial ocean, was like a canoe from a distant shore, unfamiliar, powerful, and unpredictable. It was the visitor from beyond seas, the fiery voyager who came once and never again. Its trail lit the night sky like a wake on dark waters, reminding humanity that the universe is wider, stranger, and more mysterious than even the greatest navigators can chart. And so, the Polynesian tales endure. In their fear and wonder, they preserved a truth we still feel. When a fiery stranger blazes across the heavens, it is not just light, it is meaning. It is a message written across the cosmic sea, reminding us that we too are voyagers, sailing through the unknown. The Celtic Druids and the Blade of Fire across the sky, among the ancient Celts whose sacred groves and stone circles dotted the landscapes of Britain, Gaul, and Ireland, the night sky was a living temple. The Druids, the priestly class who preserved knowledge through oral tradition, were not only guardians of ritual and law, but also watchers of the heavens. They read meaning in the movements of the moon, the cycles of the sun, and the rising of stars. Yet, when the harmony of the firmament was broken, when a blazing intruder carved its way across the heavens, the Druids saw more than beauty. They saw a weapon, a warning, a blade of fire wielded by the gods themselves. Celtic myths and later Roman accounts alike preserve memories of fiery apparitions, comets, and skyborne omens, interpreted as blades that cut through the sky. To the Druids, such visions were both terrifying and sacred, signs that fate itself was being reforged. The Celts envisioned the cosmos as a battlefield between forces of order and chaos, with humanity caught in the middle. Weapons dominated their mythology: swords that glowed, spears of lightning, daggers of flame. To them, the sudden appearance of a comet with its brilliant slicing tail resembled nothing so much as a sword unsheathed above the world. Roman chroniclers noted that Druids often interpreted comets as portents of war. The fiery blade in the sky was the god's sword, raised before blood would be spilled on the earth. One of the earliest references comes from Julius Caesar's own observations of the Gauls. In the Gallic Wars, Caesar mentions the Druids' obsession with signs and omens, particularly celestial ones. Though he does not describe specific comets, later writers suggest that fiery apparitions were taken as evidence that the gods demanded sacrifice. The blade of fire was seen as cutting the threads of destiny, severing the lives of kings or heralding the downfall of tribes. For a society where memory was ritualized in oral prophecy, such imagery would not have been forgotten. Irish mythology preserves hints of this celestial sword. In the Libor Gabala Eren, the Book of Invasions, there are accounts of fiery signs appearing in the sky before great battles and the coming of new peoples. One passage describes a long flame, bright as a blade, stretching from horizon to horizon. Scholars have suggested this may refer to a comet, interpreted by the Irish poets as a cosmic weapon. Later tales of Nuada's sword, one of the 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann, describe a blade that blazes with fire and always cuts true. Such myths may preserve a memory of fiery stars, transformed in story into legendary weapons. In Gaul, Pliny the Elder recorded that Druids feared tailed stars as harbingers of disaster. He described one comet that appeared like a long sword, glowing red as though stained with blood. The Gauls, he claimed, prepared for war soon after its sighting. To them, the blade of fire was not symbolic, but literal. The heavens had drawn a weapon, and humanity was expected to mirror it on Earth. The Druids, interpreters of these signs, likely saw their role as mediators, performing sacrifices, rituals, and divinations to appease the gods whose sword blazed in the sky. The Celts also linked comets and fiery stars to kingship. Their rulers were bound by sacred oaths to maintain balance between the land and the divine. When a comet appeared, it could be read as a judgment against a king who had failed in his duties. The blade of fire, cutting through the heavens, might also be cutting through his claim to rule. Legends tell of kings who lost power after fiery omens appeared, their downfall seen as divinely sanctioned. The Druids who advised kings would have used these celestial signs as proof that change was demanded by the gods. The imagery of a blade also resonated with Celtic ritual. Archaeological evidence shows that swords were often deposited in rivers and bogs as offerings to the divine. These were not acts of disposal, but of sacrifice, returning weapons to the gods from whom they were believed to come. When a sword-shaped comet blazed in the sky, it may have been understood as a divine counterpart to these earthly offerings, a cosmic sword held aloft by the gods in answer to human devotion. The ritual and the omen reflected each other. Just as swords were given to the waters, so too did the gods give a sword of flame to the heavens. In Wales, poetic traditions continued the theme. The Mabinogion and later bardic poems describe fiery stars that split the sky as with a blade. These texts, though written centuries after the classical Druids, preserve echoes of older beliefs. The bards used comet imagery to mark upheaval, rebellion, and invasion. A fiery blade in the heavens was never a passive sign. It was an announcement of change, as sharp and decisive as a sword stroke. The blade of fire was not always interpreted as wholly destructive. Some Celtic traditions saw it as a purifying force. Fire was central to Celtic ritual, from the Beltane bonfires that renewed the land to the eternal flames kept in sanctuaries. A fiery sword in the heavens could be read as cutting away corruption, burning away the old to make way for the new. Just as the Druids lit fires to mark seasonal transitions, so the gods lit fires in the sky to mark historical ones. The blade of fire was thus both a herald of destruction and of renewal. Modern interpretations of these traditions point to real astronomical events. Halley's Comet, with its recurring returns, was visible across the Celtic world, and its spectacular appearance in 87 BCE and again in 66 CE may have inspired some of these records. Yet there are also descriptions of singular fiery stars said to come once and not again. These stranger comets resemble the interstellar visitors of today, like Three-Eye Atlas, which blaze briefly before vanishing forever. If such an event occurred in the Celtic skies, it would have left a profound mark preserved in memory as the blade of fire. The Druids' lack of written records means much of this is reconstructed from fragments, but the consistency of imagery across Celtic, Roman, and Irish accounts suggests a shared understanding. A comet was not simply a celestial body, it was a weapon of the gods, a sword raised against the world. It demanded fear, reverence, and response. To ignore it would be folly. To heed it was to align with fate. The legacy of the blade of fire endured even into Christian times. Medieval chronicles in Ireland and Britain still described comets as fiery swords that announced plagues, invasions, or the deaths of kings. The old Druidic worldview lingered, reshaped by new theology, but still haunted by the same image, a blade of flame drawn across the sky. Today, astronomers calculate cometary orbits with precision, charting their returns centuries in advance. Yet when a particularly bright comet blazes across the heavens, we still reach for metaphor. We call it a sword, a torch, a blade. The imagery the Druids used remains alive because it captures what we feel when confronted with such a sight: awe, fear, and the sense that something greater is at work. And so the mystery of the Druids' blade of fire persists. Was it inspired by Halley's cyclical visits, by one-time interstellar wanderers, or by poetic imagination? We may never know. But the image survives, carved into the memory of a people whose priests watched the heavens from their stone circles and sacred groves. To them, the comet was not just a wandering star. It was a blade, fiery and divine, cutting through the fabric of history, shaping the fate of kings and tribes. The Druids are long gone, but the night sky remains. When a new comet appears, fiery and sudden, we stand as they once did, beneath a blade of fire drawn across the heavens, wondering what it means and whether its edge is meant for us, the Indian Vedic texts of the tail star of destruction. In the sacred traditions of ancient India, the sky was more than a dome of distant lights. It was a living scripture, woven with the deeds of gods, ancestors, and cosmic beings. The Vedas, the earliest Sanskrit hymns and chants composed more than 3,000 years ago, are filled with reverence for the sun, the moon, the dawn, and the fire of the heavens. Yet scattered among the hymns and later Vedic commentaries are cryptic references to terrifying celestial intruders. Stars with blazing tails that appeared without warning and vanished just as suddenly. These were not the steady constellations that guided rituals, nor the cyclical planets whose motions could be predicted. They were Dhumaketu, smoke-bannered stars, what we now call comets. Among these fiery visitors, one stood out in the imagination of the Vedic seers, the tail star of destruction, a cosmic herald of calamity that cut across the heavens like a divine weapon. The Rig Veda, the oldest of the Vedas, contains passages that may allude to such phenomena. Hymns to Agni, the fire god, speak of flames that streak across the vault of heaven like banners trailing smoke. Scholars debate whether these are descriptions of lightning, meteors, or comets. But the imagery of a banner with a fiery tail fits the comet more closely than any other. Later texts such as the Atharva Veda mention Dhumaketu directly, identifying them as omens of famine, pestilence, and the downfall of kings. To the Vedic priests, a blazing-tailed star was never benign. It was the tail star of destruction, sweeping misfortune before it like smoke across the sky. The term Dhumaketu itself is revealing. It combines Duma, smoke, with Ketu, banner or sign. To the Vedic mind, the comet's tail was like a column of smoke, rising and spreading ominously. Later Sanskrit texts, including the Mahabharata and the Puranas, elaborate on this imagery, describing comets as smoke stars that appear before wars and disasters. The Vedic seers, skilled at finding patterns in the heavens, could predict the risings of the sun and moon, but the sudden appearance of a comet shattered this order. Its smoky tail was a reminder that the cosmos itself could erupt in chaos. One of the most dramatic references comes from the Atharva Veda, which warns, "When the smoke-bannered star rises, kings will fall, harvests will wither, and men will perish." This verse, though poetic, captures the dread comets inspired. The comet's tail was imagined not as passive, but as active, sweeping away prosperity, cutting through the bonds of society and leaving only ruin. In later Indian astrology, comets retained this fearful status, cataloged as harbingers of destruction in texts like the Brihat Samhita of Varahamihira, a 6th century astronomer who inherited the Vedic tradition. He wrote of 1,000 comets, each associated with specific disasters: wars, floods, droughts, the deaths of rulers. Among them was one especially feared, a comet with a long blood-red tail called the Sword Star. It was the continuation of the old Vedic tail star of destruction. The Mahabharata, India's great epic, also preserves cometary imagery. During the climactic war between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, omens fill the sky: red moons, eclipses, and fiery stars. One passage describes a smoke-bannered star, blazing, cutting through the heavens with its tail sweeping the sky. The epic connects this star with the slaughter to come, as though the war itself was written first in the heavens. To the poets of the Mahabharata, the tail star of destruction was not only an omen but a participant in history. Its fiery tail, a cosmic sword, striking down kings before men ever raised their weapons. Even the later Puranas continued to emphasize the destructive power of comets. In some accounts, the god Rudra, an early form of Shiva, is linked to fiery stars. His arrows of flame unleashed against the world resemble comets streaking across the sky. In this way, the tail star of destruction was absorbed into mythology as an expression of divine wrath. When humans strayed from Dharma, the cosmic law, the heavens sent a fiery-tailed star to announce judgment. What is particularly striking in the Vedic and post-Vedic view is the singular nature of these stars. The ordinary planets and cycles of the moon were predictable, part of the cosmic rhythm, but the tail star was an intruder. It came once without warning, blazing with terrifying brilliance, and then disappeared into the void. Some texts emphasize this by describing such stars as wanderers without return. This language resonates with modern understanding of interstellar comets like 3I Atlas, which enter the solar system only once, never to circle back. To the Vedic mind, such a singular, unrepeatable star could only mean one thing: destruction. The tail star's reputation as a destroyer may also reflect real environmental consequences. Large comets, especially if their dust filled the atmosphere, could dim the sun, disrupt monsoon cycles, and cause famine. In a society utterly dependent on seasonal rains, such changes would have been catastrophic. If famine followed the appearance of a comet, the link between the two would be seared into cultural memory. The Vedic priests, whose duty was to interpret the heavens for the sake of kings and peoples, would naturally have warned that such a star was the harbinger of calamity. Rituals arose to counteract its power. The Atharva Veda includes charms and incantations to ward off the evils of fiery stars. Sacrifices of fire, milk, and grain were offered to Agni, the god of fire, to appease the destructive flame in the sky. The idea was not to deny the omen, but to redirect it, to transform destruction into purification. In this sense, the tail star of destruction was also part of a cycle. It burned away corruption, forcing renewal. Much like the Zoroastrian star of renewal or the Hopi blue star Kachina, the Vedic comet was both end and beginning, death and rebirth. The tail star's symbolic role deepened in Indian astrology, which inherited the Vedic sky-watching tradition. By the classical period, comets were carefully catalogued, each given a name and linked to a type of disaster. Yet one category remained most dreaded: the Ketu. In later Hindu cosmology, Ketu became a celestial node associated with chaos and illusion, paired with Rahu, the devourer of the sun and moon during eclipses. Some scholars argue that the mythic Ketu, the severed head of a demon transformed into a star, was rooted in the Vedic memory of comets. The fiery tail, the destructive power, the singular alien presence, all these traits shaped Ketu into the astrological embodiment of cosmic disruption. The tail star of destruction had become a permanent part of Indian cosmology. Today, when we watch interstellar comets blaze through our skies, we see them as icy wanderers, fragments of distant star systems. Yet the awe they inspire is the same as it was in the Vedic age. The tail star of destruction, described in hymns and feared in prophecy, reminds us that humanity has always read the heavens for meaning. For the Vedic seers, it was the god's sword, the banner of smoke that swept kings and empires away. For us, it is a scientific marvel. But perhaps both perspectives are true. The comet is at once a natural object and a symbol, a fiery reminder of how fragile human order is beneath the vast, unpredictable sky. The mystery endures. Did the Vedic texts preserve the memory of real cometary catastrophes, perhaps even interstellar visitors, that blazed once before vanishing forever? Or was the tail star of destruction a purely symbolic vision of cosmic wrath? We may never know. But the words remain, carved into the world's oldest scriptures. The smoke-bannered star rises, its tail sweeping the heavens, and with it comes destruction. Whether in myth or in truth, the tail star continues to blaze across the human imagination, as terrifying and mesmerizing now as it was to the seers who first chanted its name beneath the Indian night sky, the medieval chroniclers who linked comets to plagues. In the dark centuries of medieval Europe, when famine, war, and pestilence stalked the land, people looked upward for signs that might explain their suffering. The night sky was not only a canvas for wonder, but also a book of omens, where every unusual light bore a message from God. Among these, comets held a uniquely terrifying power. With their sudden appearance, fiery heads, and long sweeping tails, they seemed like flaming swords drawn across the heavens. Chroniclers, priests, and scholars alike wrote of comets as harbingers of disease, interpreting their fiery presence as warnings of pestilence that soon followed. To them, the sky and earth were bound together in a divine order. When the heavens burned, humanity would soon be scourged by plague. The association between comets and pestilence was not a medieval invention. Ancient writers from Aristotle to Pliny had already speculated on the connection between comets and earthly disasters. Pliny described comets as portents of public disasters and often tied them to famine and plague. But in the Middle Ages, when waves of epidemic disease swept through Europe, this belief became visceral. Comets were no longer abstract omens in books. They were seen blazing over towns that soon became graveyards. Chroniclers recorded these events with dread, building a body of testimony that wove comets and plagues together in the medieval imagination. One of the earliest and most dramatic examples comes from the 6th century, during what historians now call the Plague of Justinian. Procopius, the Byzantine historian, wrote of fiery apparitions in the sky that preceded the outbreak. Other writers of the period described tailed stars seen above Constantinople just before the disease struck, killing millions across the Mediterranean world. The plague, which returned in waves for 2 centuries, became associated with the heavens' wrath. In the minds of medieval Christians, the comet was a torch of divine anger sent to ignite pestilence among the people. Centuries later, the Black Death cemented this association beyond doubt. In 1347, as plague ships sailed into European harbors, chroniclers across the continent described a blazing comet that had been seen in the skies months before. Giovanni Villani, the Florentine historian, recorded a comet of extraordinary brilliance whose tail stretched across the heavens like a sword. In his city, half the population would perish. The Paris medical faculty, commissioned by the king to explain the plague, wrote a famous report blaming the disease on a great conjunction of planets in 1345, but also on a corrupted star whose influence tainted the air. To ordinary people, this star was the comet they had seen, its fiery tail believed to have poisoned the atmosphere with deadly vapors. The idea that comets released pestilential matter into the air became widespread. Medieval medicine embraced the theory of miasma, bad air filled with corruption and disease. Comets with their smoky tails seemed to fit perfectly into this framework. Chroniclers describe how the comet's fiery breath polluted the atmosphere, turning it poisonous. People believed that when a comet's tail swept over the earth, it left behind invisible seeds of pestilence that sank into the lungs of the living. The comet was not only a sign of plague, but its direct cause. Astrologers reinforced this fear. Medieval astrology, blending Greco-Roman, Arabic, and Christian traditions, treated comets as instruments of divine punishment. They were often depicted as torches or spears, their tails dripping venom upon the earth. One astrologer wrote that comets burn the air with their flame and corrupt it with their poison, whence arise mortal plagues. In manuscripts, illuminators painted comets hovering above dying cities, their fiery tails showering pestilence like arrows. These images were not symbolic alone, they reflected real terror, the sense that heaven itself had lit the match for earthly disease. The link between comets and plagues appears again and again in chronicles. In 1006, a brilliant celestial object, possibly the supernova of that year, was seen across Europe and Asia. Many European chroniclers described it as a comet. Soon after, outbreaks of disease struck, and the memory of the fiery star was tied to pestilence. In 1110, a comet was seen over England, its appearance followed by famine and plague. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle recorded that a star appeared with a great tail, and soon after came sickness and death. In 1402, a comet was reported across Germany and France. Within the year, plague returned to many towns. Each new outbreak seemed to confirm the belief. Comets were not merely omens, they were agents of death. The fear of comets reached such intensity that special prayers were composed to ward off their influence. In some regions, churches rang bells when a comet appeared, hoping to drive away its poisonous breath. Processions of penitents marched through towns, flagellating themselves to appease God's wrath, believing the comet's appearance meant divine judgment was at hand. For rulers, the sight of a comet demanded immediate action. Proclamations, fasts, and religious ceremonies were ordered to protect their realms from the plague the comet surely heralded. Not all voices agreed. A few medieval scholars, influenced by Aristotle, argued that comets were merely natural phenomena formed from earthly exhalations ignited in the upper atmosphere. But even these naturalistic explanations did not comfort people. If comets rose from corrupted vapors, then they were still linked to pestilence by nature itself. Whether divine messengers or natural exhalations, they still meant disease. The connection lingered well beyond the medieval period. In 1665, as plague returned to London, many recalled the appearance of a bright comet 3 years earlier in 1662. The diarist Samuel Pepys noted how people whispered of the connection, blaming the comet for the pestilence. Even in the age of early modern science, the medieval association of comets with plague remained strong. The imagery of comets as flaming swords also carried biblical weight. Medieval Christians connected comets with the angel's sword in the Book of Revelation, which heralded apocalypse and pestilence. Chroniclers often describe comets in martial terms: a sword of fire, a spear of flame, a torch dripping blood. These were not idle metaphors. To them, the comet was literally a sword raised by heaven against humanity, its blade cutting invisible wounds that festered into plague. What makes the medieval chronicles so haunting is the consistency of their testimony. From England to Italy, from Germany to Spain, people saw comets and within months buried their dead by the thousands. In hindsight, we know that plague was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas and rats. Yet the coincidence of comets and epidemics was real enough to convince entire generations. The comet's fiery intrusion into the night sky mirrored the sudden intrusion of plague into human life. Both were uninvited, terrifying, and unstoppable. Modern astronomers, of course, understand comets differently. They are icy bodies from the outer solar system, or in the case of interstellar visitors like 3I Atlas, fragments from beyond that blaze when they approach the sun. Their tails are not poison, but streams of gas and dust. Yet the old dread remains, because it's buried in our cultural memory. When a comet appears suddenly in the sky, even now we speak of it with awe and unease. It is easy to imagine how, in the darkness of medieval Europe, such a fiery intruder could only mean pestilence. The medieval chroniclers, writing by candlelight in monasteries and towns besieged by death, left us their testimony. Comets were not just stars. They were flames of heaven, sweeping pestilence across the earth. Their words reveal not superstition, but the human attempt to find meaning in chaos. The plague was invisible, its cause unknown. But the comet was visible, undeniable, blazing across the night. To link the two was to make sense of suffering, to find a sign in the heavens for the horrors on earth. And so the mystery endures, not in science, but in symbolism. The medieval belief that comets brought plague may not be true, but it speaks to a deeper truth. When disaster strikes, we look to the heavens for explanation. We seek order in fire and stars. The chronicles remind us that comets, whether natural or interstellar, are not only icy wanderers, they are also mirrors, reflecting human fear, hope, and the desperate search for meaning in a world forever shadowed by plague. The Persian epic of the sky-born messenger of doom. In the vast cultural and literary tradition of ancient Persia, the heavens were never mute. Stars were soldiers of the divine, the sun was the king of the sky, and fiery intruders were signs of destiny. Among the myths and epics that flourished in the Persian world, from the earliest Zoroastrian hymns to the grand narratives of Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, there are echoes of a terrifying figure. A sky-born messenger, a fiery star whose appearance heralded doom. This being, sometimes described as a comet, other times as a blazing angel or a weapon flung from the heavens, was remembered as the sky-born messenger of doom, an omen of collapse for empires and kings. The Zoroastrian worldview provided fertile ground for this imagery. In the Avesta, the sacred scriptures of Zoroastrianism, stars are not passive bodies, but divine entities aligned either with Asha, order, or with Druch, chaos. When unusual stars appeared, those with fiery tails or sudden brilliance, they were interpreted as weapons in the great cosmic struggle between Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, and Angra Mainyu, the spirit of destruction. The Bundahishan, a later cosmological text, describes tailed stars that sweep across the heavens, bringing pestilence and famine. These were not cyclical bodies, but singular omens, their sudden arrival seen as a rupture in the order of creation. The skyborn messenger of doom was not merely a symbol. In Persian imagination, it became a character, a fiery being dispatched by the heavens to announce calamity. Middle Persian commentaries refer to a star that blazes in the appointed age, bringing ruin upon the kingdoms of the earth. It was both star and messenger, comet and angel, its fiery tail likened to a whip or a sword. The Persians, whose culture often linked kingship to celestial signs, feared that when such a messenger appeared, the fall of dynasties was near. The Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings, composed by Ferdowsi around the year 1000 CE, preserves elements of this tradition. Though it is a literary epic rather than scripture, it draws deeply on older myth and history. In one episode, during the reign of a tyrant king, the sky is said to have burned with a flaming star whose tail stretched across the firmament. The people, terrified, saw it as a herald of divine judgment. Within the story, rebellion soon rose, the king was overthrown, and the comet's fiery blaze was remembered as the messenger of doom that foretold his downfall. While Ferdowsi does not use scientific terms, the imagery unmistakably recalls a comet, a bright head, a long tail, a singular and ominous presence. Other Persian chronicles echo similar themes. The historian al-Tabari, writing in the Islamic period but preserving older traditions, recorded that before the death of great rulers, fiery stars were often seen. In his annals, comets appear before the fall of empires, their presence interpreted as a warning from God. Persian astrologers, heirs to both Zoroastrian and Hellenistic traditions, cataloged comets in their manuals, always assigning them meanings of disaster, pestilence, war, or the fall of kings. Among these, one category stood apart. Stars that appeared once, burned brightly, and never returned. These were remembered not as ordinary comets, but as messengers, singular heralds of doom. The symbolic resonance of a fiery star as a messenger was powerful in Persian culture because messengers themselves were central to the functioning of empire. The Achaemenid Persians had created the royal road, along which mounted couriers carried news at incredible speed. Herodotus wrote of them, "Neither snow nor rain, nor heat nor darkness of night prevents them from completing their appointed course with all speed." To imagine the heavens themselves dispatching a fiery courier made the omen all the more potent. The skyborn messenger of doom was the divine counterpart to earthly messengers, but its news was always catastrophic. Persian myths often transformed astronomical events into epic symbolism. The comet's tail, long and fiery, was likened to a sword, unsheathed against humanity. In some texts, it was compared to the mace of Mithra, the warrior god of covenant and justice. Others saw it as the arrow of Tishtria, the star god who fought against drought. But when the messenger of doom appeared, these weapons were not wielded for protection, they were instruments of judgment. Its fire was not cleansing, but destructive, burning through the threads of fate that held kings upon their thrones. The psychological impact of such appearances cannot be underestimated. Persia, at the crossroads of empires, was repeatedly struck by invasions, famines, and plagues. To see a comet blazing across the night sky in the midst of turmoil would naturally be interpreted as a divine commentary. When Alexander the Great conquered Persia, legends arose that a fiery star had been seen before his arrival, warning of the empire's fall. Centuries later, when the Mongols swept across the Persian plateau, chroniclers again described fiery omens blazing above, as though the messenger of doom had returned to announce yet another apocalypse. Ritual responses to such omens were part of Persian religious life. Zoroastrian priests performed rites of purification, offering prayers and sacrifices to counteract the destructive influence of fiery stars. Fire temples, where sacred flames burned perpetually, became places of refuge, their light thought to balance the corruption spread by the comet's tail. Yet even the most elaborate rituals could not erase the fear. The messenger of doom was a herald, not to be silenced or delayed. Its appearance was destiny revealed, not destiny averted. Later, Islamic-era Persian poets continued to weave the image into their works. Hafez, the great 14th century poet, speaks of the star of calamity that burned above, linking it to personal sorrow and political chaos. In mystical Sufi writings, the comet becomes a metaphor for divine judgment and the fleeting nature of life. The messenger of doom was reinterpreted in spiritual terms, a reminder that all worldly empires are temporary, that every kingdom and every soul must one day fall. What makes the Persian tradition particularly striking is the emphasis on singularity. While many cultures saw comets as recurring omens, the Persians often described the messenger as one who appears once in an age. This language resonates with modern discoveries of interstellar objects like 3I Atlas, visitors from beyond the solar system that pass once and never return. To the ancient Persian imagination, such a singular star was precisely the kind of being that could be called a messenger. It arrived from the unknown, delivered its fiery warning, and vanished forever into the void. The mystery, then, is whether the Persians truly witnessed such one-time visitors, or whether they simply interpreted ordinary comets through the lens of cosmic struggle. We cannot know for certain, but the stories remain: scrolls and epics, hymns and chronicles, all speaking of the same fiery herald, the same blade of fire across the sky, the same message of doom. Today, when comets blaze through our skies, astronomers measure their orbits, analyze their dust, and trace their origins to the Oort cloud or beyond. Yet even in the age of science, their sudden brilliance stirs the same unease that the Persians felt. We may not see in them the hand of Ahura Mazda or the mace of Mithra, but we still feel the weight of their symbolism, that the universe is vast, unpredictable, and sometimes merciless. The Persian epic of the skyborn messenger of doom reminds us that the heavens are not silent spectators. For the ancients, they were voices, flames, messengers that spoke of destiny. When the comet blazed, they listened and they heard doom. Whether myth or memory of real interstellar visitors, the story endures, etched in poetry and prophecy, a fiery courier racing across the night sky to remind humanity that no empire, no king, and no age is eternal. The Babylonian astronomers and the lost star charts. Long before the Greeks drew constellations into myths or the Romans recorded omens in their histories, the Babylonians of Mesopotamia were mapping the skies with astonishing precision. From their temples and ziggurats, they watched the heavens night after night, scratching the movements of planets, eclipses, and stars onto clay tablets. Their records stretch back over 3,000 years, making them some of humanity's first true astronomers. Yet among their surviving texts, broken and incomplete, are haunting references to fiery intruders, comets, tailed stars, and wandering flames that did not fit into the orderly cycles of the moon and planets. Some of these tablets are missing altogether, known only by fragments or references in later works. Scholars speak of the lost star charts of Babylon, a vanished record of celestial anomalies, among them a mysterious star that appeared suddenly, blazed with fire, and vanished forever. To the Babylonians, these disruptions were not merely astronomical, they were messages from the gods. Babylonian astronomy was intimately tied to religion. The stars were not inanimate but divine beings, manifestations of the gods who ruled the universe. The moon god Sin, the sun god Shamash, and the goddess Ishtar as Venus had their movements carefully tracked, for their behavior was seen as a mirror of divine will. When the planets deviated or eclipses darkened the sun, the scribes and priests read them as omens for kings and kingdoms. Every king had court astrologers, whose job was not only to predict, but to interpret, turning celestial events into political guidance. For such a system, a comet, sudden, unpredictable, blazing with a tail like smoke, was the most disturbing sight of all. One of the most famous collections of omen texts is the Enuma Anu Enlil, a massive compilation of celestial signs assembled around the 2nd millennium BCE. Within it are references to stars with tails, stars that blaze like torches, and stars that appear in the west and do not return. The language is ambiguous, but most scholars agree that these describe comets. The omens were stark. If such a star appeared, the king would fall, famine would spread, or enemies would invade. Unlike the orderly cycles of the planets, these stars did not belong to the known family of the heavens. They were intruders, divine messengers of upheaval. The Babylonians even had a word for them, shutu, a term often translated as sword or weapon, used for certain fiery stars. This resonates with how later cultures described comets as swords drawn in the sky. In the Babylonian system, however, the interpretation was codified. A tailed star appearing in the east might mean victory for an enemy. In the west, plague. In the north, rebellion. Their omen lists cataloged hundreds of possible variations, giving astrologers the tools to advise kings. When a fiery star blazed overhead, the astrologer's warning could mean the difference between war and peace, survival and downfall. Yet there are tantalizing gaps. Many omen texts refer to records of earlier scribes that are now missing. Some speak of a star that came once in the time of the great kings and was never seen again. Others mention the fire star that vanished into emptiness. These fragments suggest that the Babylonians may have witnessed extraordinary celestial events, perhaps interstellar visitors like 3i Atlas that never returned. Without the lost star charts, we cannot know the details, but the memory of singular, non-recurring stars lingers like an echo. The accuracy of Babylonian astronomy makes this even more intriguing. These were not casual sky watchers. By the first millennium BCE, Babylonian astronomers could predict lunar eclipses and even some planetary phenomena with mathematical precision. They distinguished carefully between regular stars and anomalies. For them to single out a star as unique, appearing once and never returning, suggests they recognized it as something outside the normal order. Their lost records may have described the passage of a one-time visitor, interpreted through the lens of omen, but grounded in genuine observation. Babylonian kings took these omens seriously. Chronicles describe how rulers delayed battles, canceled campaigns, or performed elaborate rituals when tailed stars appeared. In some cases, substitute kings were appointed, a practice known as shar puhi. When an ominous sign threatened the king, a commoner would be placed temporarily on the throne, absorbing the disaster, while the real king hid in safety. When the danger passed, the substitute was executed, and the king restored. Comets, the most terrifying of signs, often triggered this ritual. The skyborne messenger of doom in Persia or the blade of fire among Celts has its parallel here. A fiery star wielded such weight that it could rearrange the very throne. The connection between comets and disaster was reinforced by real events. In the reign of King Shulgi of Ur, records mention a fiery star appearing shortly before famine struck. Later, in Neo-Babylonian times, comets were noted before invasions and plagues. The repetition of such coincidences etched the belief deeper. Tailed stars were heralds of calamity. The lost charts may have contained even more such records, tying specific comets to historical catastrophes. There is also evidence that Babylonians linked comets to myths of chaos. The dragon Tiamat, slain by the god Marduk in creation myth, is sometimes described in terms of smoke and flame. Some scholars suggest that comets, with their writhing tails, were seen as echoes of this primordial monster, reminders that chaos still lurked beyond the ordered heavens. When a comet appeared, it was as if Tiamat herself had broken free, threatening to undo creation. The lost charts may have contained rituals for combating such chaos, prayers and sacrifices to Marduk to restrain the fiery intruder. In later centuries, Greek and Roman writers credited the Babylonians with unparalleled knowledge of the heavens. They inherited Babylonian star lists and methods of prediction. Yet even these later sources admit that much was already lost. The Alexandrian scholars spoke of ancient records written on thousands of tablets which no longer survived. The memory of Babylonian comet observations may have reached them in fragments, inspiring their own dread of fiery stars. But the full detail, the careful notes of direction, brightness, duration, was gone. The tragedy of the lost star charts is that they might have offered humanity its earliest glimpse of interstellar visitors. A comet blazing once, never returning, would have been recognized as singular. The Babylonians, systematic as they were, would have recorded it. That record might now lie buried in the ruins of Sippar or Uruk, waiting to be discovered, or it may have crumbled to dust millennia ago. What remains are only tantalizing lines in surviving omen lists, references to a fiery star that came and vanished into emptiness. And yet, even in fragments, the power of the Babylonian vision remains. For them, the sky was not random. It was a message board of the gods. Every star, every flame, every tailed intruder was a sign to be read. Their chronicles reveal a civilization that saw its fate bound to the heavens, where the rise and fall of kings was written in fire above. The lost charts, though gone, symbolize humanity's oldest attempt to wrest meaning from the unpredictable, to connect the chaos of comets with the chaos of human history. Today, with telescopes and mathematics, we can trace the orbits of comets across centuries. We know that some return and others, like 3I Atlas, blaze once and vanish forever. But our awe is no less than that of the Babylonians. We too watch the sky and feel the unease of singular visitors. The difference is only in interpretation. Where they saw divine messengers of doom, we see natural wanderers of ice and dust. Yet both perspectives acknowledge the same truth, that the universe is alive with intrusions, that the heavens are not fixed but constantly disrupted by flames of the void. The Babylonian astronomers, with their styluses and clay tablets, left us the first great attempt to order that disruption. The lost star charts may never be found, but their ghost lingers in the fragments we do possess. And in those fragments, we hear the same message. When the heavens blaze with a tailed star, beware. For whether by omen or by physics, the world is about to change. The Aztec prophecies of the smoking star and empire's end animals. In the heart of Mesoamerica, where colossal temples rose toward the sun and rituals bound society to the gods, the Aztecs believed the universe was fragile, always on the brink of collapse. Their cosmology taught that the world had already ended 4 times, destroyed by fire, flood, and monsters, and that they now lived in the precarious 5th sun. To sustain this sun, human sacrifice was necessary, for the gods demanded blood in exchange for cosmic balance. Against this backdrop, the sudden appearance of a comet, a blazing Citlalin Popoca, or smoking star, was not simply a natural phenomenon. It was an omen of destruction, a fiery sign in the heavens announcing that the sun itself might fail, that empires might fall, and that the world could once again be unmade. Aztec priests, skilled in both astronomy and divination, kept careful watch over the skies. They observed the movements of Venus, the phases of the moon, the cycles of the sun. These celestial rhythms were tied to agricultural calendars and religious festivals. But comets disrupted the order. Unlike predictable eclipses or the cyclical return of Venus, comets appeared suddenly, trailing smoke and flame. They were unpredictable intruders, messengers from beyond. In Nahuatl, the Aztec language, comets were called smoking stars because their long, luminous tails looked like columns of rising incense or smoke from a sacrificial fire. Their symbolism was immediate. They were offerings from the heavens, but offerings that demanded repayment in blood and catastrophe. One of the most chilling accounts of Aztec comet lore comes from the early colonial period, preserved by Spanish friars who recorded native testimonies. According to the Florentine Codex, compiled by Bernardino de Sahagún in the 16th century, a comet blazed across the sky in the years before the arrival of Hernán Cortés and the Spanish conquest. The Aztec priests interpreted it as a terrible omen. The smoking star meant that the reign of the Emperor Moctezuma and the empire itself was nearing its end. The chronicles describe the comet's tail as spanning the heavens, burning with terrifying brilliance, leaving the people filled with dread. Within a decade, the prophecy was fulfilled. The empire fell, brought down by foreign invaders, disease, and betrayal. To the Aztecs, this was not coincidence. The comet had been the warning, the divine announcement of doom. The gods had spoken in fire, and their empire had crumbled. The idea that comets heralded the fall of rulers was not unique to the Aztecs, but in their cosmology it carried deeper weight. Each world age had ended with celestial upheaval, suns torn from the sky, fires falling from heaven, floods drowning the earth. A comet, with its blazing body and smoky tail, seemed like a fragment of those destructive ages returning to warn of the next. Priests feared that the smoking star might be the torch that extinguished the 5th sun, plunging the world into darkness forever. The Aztecs also interpreted comets as weapons of the gods. One text describes the smoking star as the burning spear of Huitzilopochtli, the war god who guided the Aztecs to found their capital, Tenochtitlan. Just as warriors hurled spears tipped with obsidian, so too the gods hurled fiery spears across the sky. When such a weapon appeared, it meant war, famine, or plague was about to be unleashed. The comet was not a passive sign, it was an active strike, a cosmic weapon cutting through the heavens. Aztec rituals reflected this terror. When a smoking star appeared, priests performed sacrifices to appease the gods. Victims were offered to Huitzilopochtli and to the sun, their hearts torn out to renew cosmic energy. Fires were extinguished and relit, symbolizing the attempt to cleanse the corruption brought by the comet's smoke. The people fasted, refrained from certain foods, and observed omens in the behavior of animals and birds. Every act was shaped by the belief that the comet was more than light. It was a divine judgment, one that could only be answered with devotion and blood. The imagery of smoke itself carried layered meaning. In Aztec rituals, incense smoke rose as an offering to the gods. In daily life, smoke from fires sustained warmth and cooking, but smoke could also choke, obscure, and signal destruction. A smoking star was both sacred and deadly, a fire in the heavens that both resembled prayer and threatened annihilation. Its tail, stretching across the sky, could be read as the smoke of cosmic sacrifice, a sign that the gods demanded more from the earth below. Spanish chroniclers, though often dismissive of Aztec beliefs, noted how seriously comets were taken. Fray Diego Durán recorded that when comets appeared, there was great fear, for they said that pestilence, famine, and war would follow. The Spaniards themselves were not immune to comet fear. Europe also saw comets as omens, but among the Aztecs, the association was absolute. The smoking star was not a vague warning. It was the announcement of specific calamity, often tied to rulers and empires. The comet that appeared before the conquest was remembered vividly. According to native accounts, it was seen for many nights, its tail spanning the sky. Priests declared that it signaled the end of Moctezuma's reign. When the Spanish arrived, bringing strange weapons and diseases, the people believed the prophecy had come true. To them, Cortés was not merely a man, but the embodiment of the comet's omen. The empire had been warned. The smoking star had carried the message of its destruction. In Aztec poetry, fragments of this imagery survive. Some verses describe stars that blaze like torches trailing smoke across the sky. Others liken comets to jaguars leaping through darkness, their fiery tails like claws tearing at the heavens. These poetic images reveal how deeply the smoking star was woven into Aztec imagination, not just as science or omen, but as art, metaphor, and prophecy. Modern scholars note that Aztec records of comets may include sightings of Halley's Comet, which passed in 1531, shortly after the conquest, and earlier in 1456 and 1066. Each of these appearances could have been preserved in oral tradition, transformed into prophecy. Yet there are also descriptions of singular stars, blazing once and never again, wanderers without return. Such phrasing echoes other cultures' accounts of interstellar visitors. Could the Aztecs have witnessed something like 3I Atlas centuries before? A one-time comet blazing from beyond the solar system? If so, it would explain why their descriptions carry such a sense of finality. The smoking star was not only rare, it was unique, a messenger from the void itself. Even today, comets evoke unease. We know they are icy fragments, not omens of divine wrath. Yet, when one blazes across the sky, its smoky tail luminous against the dark, we feel the same awe that seized the Aztecs. It is easy to imagine standing in Tenochtitlan, seeing a fiery comet blaze above the great temple, and feeling that the world was about to end. The Aztec prophecies of the smoking star remind us how deeply humans have tied celestial events to the fate of empires. For them, the comet was not distant science, but immediate destiny. It was the torch of the gods, the smoking spear of war, the signal that suns and empires alike could be extinguished. The fall of Moctezuma, the conquest of Tenochtitlan, the collapse of their world, all were remembered as written first in the sky. The empire is gone, its temples in ruins, but the legend remains. The smoking star, Citlalin-Popoca, still burns in human memory as the fire that heralds the end of worlds. Whether natural phenomenon or divine messenger, it carried a message the Aztecs understood all too well. No empire, however mighty, can endure forever under the smoking stars of heaven. The Ethiopian Kebra-Nagast and the Wanderer from Afar. Among the sacred texts of Ethiopia, none is more celebrated than the Kebra-Nagast, the glory of kings. Composed in the 14th century but drawing upon far older traditions, this work weaves together biblical narrative, Ethiopian legend, and dynastic history into a grand account of how the Solomonic kings of Ethiopia inherited their right to rule. Its central story tells of the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon, the birth of their son Menelik, and the eventual transport of the Ark of the Covenant to Ethiopia. For centuries, Ethiopian emperors drew their legitimacy from this text, which bound their thrones directly to the will of God. Yet, within the layers of prophecy, hymns, and visions recorded in the Kebra Nagast, there are tantalizing references to celestial signs, among them a mysterious star described as the Wanderer from Afar. This fiery intruder, unlike the fixed stars of heaven or the cyclical movements of the sun and moon, was said to blaze suddenly into the sky, a stranger among familiar constellations. The Wanderer was not just a star, it was a messenger, interpreted as a sign of divine intervention, often linked to great upheavals in the history of nations. Some passages describe it as a flame that travels, not as the sun nor as the moon, but as one who journeys from a far place. To Ethiopian readers steeped in biblical tradition, this resembled the Star of Jacob spoken of in the Book of Numbers, a sign of kings rising and kingdoms falling. Yet the specific imagery of the Kebra Nagast suggests more. A comet or interstellar visitor blazing across the sky, remembered as an omen of both doom and renewal. The Kebra Nagast was not merely mythic, it was political theology. Its authors and compilers sought to anchor the Ethiopian monarchy in divine destiny. When the text invokes the Wanderer from Afar, it often does so in the context of prophecy, warning kings to remain faithful or face destruction. One passage associates the Wanderer with the days when kings are cast down and new nations rise, a clear reminder that empires stand or fall by God's will. In this sense, the appearance of a fiery stranger in the heavens was a cosmic vote of no confidence, a message that the throne had lost divine favor. For Ethiopians who lived at the crossroads of Africa and the Near East, the sky was a living text. Astronomy blended with theology, just as it had in Mesopotamia, Persia, and Israel. The priests of Axum and later Christian Ethiopia watched for signs in the heavens, not out of idle curiosity, but as part of their duty to interpret God's messages. When an unusual star appeared, it was immediately given meaning. The Wanderer from Afar may thus preserve cultural memory of comets seen over the Ethiopian highlands, perhaps even Halley's Comet, which appeared spectacularly in 1301 and would have been visible to the scribes who compiled the Kebra Nagast. To them, its sudden blaze would have seemed like a traveler from beyond creation, a fiery visitor carrying news of God's will. Yet the text does not describe the Wanderer as cyclical. Instead, it emphasizes its singularity, a star that comes not from among the stars we know, nor returns to its place. This phrasing resonates eerily with modern descriptions of interstellar comets like 3I Atlas or 1I Oumuamua, which pass once through the solar system and never return. To the Ethiopian scribes, such a star was an uninvited guest at the table of heaven, a messenger who journeyed from unknown realms. Its very strangeness was the proof of its importance. If the familiar stars sang the daily psalms of creation, then the Wanderer from Afar was a prophet crying out in fire. The Kebra Nagast also ties celestial signs to biblical history. When the Ark of the Covenant was said to leave Jerusalem with Menelik, some accounts describe a flame in the heavens that guided their way. While later interpreters have often seen this as metaphorical, it may reflect the same imagery of a comet or fiery star. Just as the Israelites had been guided by a pillar of fire during the Exodus, so too did Ethiopia's chosen people receive a heavenly messenger during their own journey. The Wanderer was thus woven into Ethiopia's sacred narrative, not only as an omen of destruction, but also as a guide, a star of destiny marking the nation's chosen status. Medieval Ethiopian chronicles expand on this theme. During the reign of King Amda Seyon in the 14th century, there were reports of a star like a torch blazing above the highlands. Chroniclers linked it to the king's campaigns against Muslim sultanates, interpreting it as a sign of divine favor for his wars. Yet other accounts described fiery stars before famines or invasions, treating them as warnings of God's displeasure. The ambiguity was deliberate. A wanderer from afar was never neutral. Its meaning depended on the actions of kings. If they ruled justly, the star confirmed their glory. If they failed, the star condemned them. The Christian symbolism of the comet also resonated in Ethiopia. The Star of Bethlehem, long interpreted in European tradition as a comet, was seen as a precedent. If a fiery star had once announced the birth of Christ, then why should a fiery star not also announce the fate of kings? Ethiopian commentators drew on this biblical imagery to interpret their own celestial signs. The wanderer from afar, then, could be Christ's star reversed, not a sign of salvation but of judgment. It was the sword-bearing angel of revelation cutting across the sky as a herald of plague, war, or dynastic fall. What makes the Ethiopian account unique is its emphasis on distance. Many cultures described comets as swords, torches, or dragons. The Kebra Nagast alone emphasizes the idea of the star as a traveler, a wanderer who comes from afar. This phrasing suggests an awareness of its alien nature, that it did not belong to the cycles of known stars or planets. It came from elsewhere, and it would not return. In modern language, this is precisely what defines an interstellar visitor. Whether by coincidence or by dimly remembered observation, the Ethiopian text frames the comet as an outsider, a messenger not of this world. Ritual responses to the wanderer were both fearful and hopeful. Chronicles describe priests ordering fasts, processions, and the recitation of psalms when fiery stars appeared. People lit great bonfires on hilltops, both to mirror and to counteract the star's blaze. Offerings of incense, whose smoke rose like a comet's tail, were made in churches to sanctify the air believed to be corrupted by the fiery visitor. These acts reflected the belief that heaven and earth were mirrors. If a star blazed in judgment, humanity must answer with fire and prayer of its own. Today, when Ethiopian Christians read the Kebra Nagast, they often focus on its dynastic and biblical themes. Yet, the echoes of celestial fear still linger. The image of the wanderer from afar remains haunting, especially when seen through the lens of modern astronomy. Interstellar comets now pass through our skies with the same suddenness and strangeness described in the ancient text. The Ethiopian chroniclers without telescopes or equations may have seen what we now understand, that not all visitors to our sky are bound by its cycles, that some come from the deep unknown, blazing once before, vanishing forever. The Kebra Nagast thus preserves more than theology. It preserves the awe of a people who saw in the heavens both promise and peril. The wanderer from afar was not just a comet or a star, it was a divine messenger, a herald of change, a reminder that even empires grounded in sacred covenant could fall under the judgment of the skies, and so the mystery endures. Did Ethiopian scribes truly witness an interstellar comet blazing across the highland skies in the 14th century, inspiring their description of the wanderer? Or was it a metaphorical creation, crafted to embody the fragility of kingship and the will of God? We cannot know, but the words remain etched in the nation's most sacred text. A star came from afar, it blazed like a flame, and it carried with it the fate of kings. Whether comet or prophecy, the wanderer from afar speaks still. It reminds us that the heavens are alive with strangers, that empires are fragile beneath their gaze, and that when a fiery traveler comes from the void, it carries not only light, but meaning, written across the sky in fire. The question of Three-Eye Atlas, a forgotten prophecy fulfilled? When comet Three-Eye Atlas was discovered in 2020, it first to be one of the most extraordinary finds in the history of astronomy. Its orbit revealed that it was not bound to our solar system at all. It was an interstellar visitor, a traveler from the deep void, entering once before vanishing forever. For the scientific community, this was only the third such object ever observed after 1I Oumuamua and 2I Borisov. But for those who look at history and myth, the question arises, had humanity seen such a visitor before? Were the ancient prophecies of fiery wanderers, of smoking stars, of blades of fire, echoes of earlier interstellar comets? And in that case, was 3 Atlas the fulfillment of a prophecy long forgotten, remembered only in fragments of scripture, epic, and omen? The discovery of 3I Atlas reignited debates that reach back thousands of years. Unlike periodic comets such as Halley's, whose returns can be calculated, 3I Atlas moved on a hyperbolic trajectory, never to circle back. Ancient observers, watching the heavens with their naked eyes and unmatched patience, would have known the difference. A comet that appeared once with no precedent and no return would have been burned into their memory as a singular event. Across cultures, from Sumer to Babylon, Egypt to Ethiopia, Mesoamerica to Polynesia, there are stories of such one-time visitors, described in language too consistent to ignore. Wanderers, smoking stars, stars without return. The question then is whether these traditions were mere metaphors or whether they were the human record of interstellar visitors. When 3I Atlas broke apart before becoming visible to the naked eye, astronomers lamented a missed spectacle. Had it survived intact, it would have rivaled the great comets of history. Instead, its fragments dimmed, a faint reminder of what could have been. Yet even in its disintegration, the symbolism was potent. A messenger from beyond had come, blazed briefly in instruments and calculations, and then vanished forever. In mythic terms, this is precisely the pattern described in so many prophecies. The star that comes once announces change and is gone. In the Kebra Nagast, it was the wanderer from afar. In Babylonian omen lists, it was the fire star that vanished into emptiness. The Hopi prophecy spoke of the blue star that appears to mark the world's transition. The Aztecs told of the smoking star that heralded empire's end. The Norse sagas spoke of a fiery whale in the sky before Ragnarok. Each culture gave it different imagery, but the core was the same: a singular star, disruptive, alien, one that could not be accounted for in the cycles of the heavens. Why then should 3 Atlas not be seen as the very fulfillment of those prophecies? The skeptic would argue that every culture had reason to fear comets, and that the tendency to exaggerate or mythologize explains the consistency. Comets, after all, are strikingly strange compared to fixed stars. Their tails, their suddenness, their unpredictability all invite metaphor. But the skeptic must also admit that most comets return. They may not be predictable without mathematics, but over centuries they repeat. And yet, ancient records often stress the uniqueness of certain fiery stars. They emphasize that these were not like the others. They appeared, and they were gone. This is precisely the defining trait of interstellar visitors like 3I Atlas. There is another reason the connection is compelling: the link between comets and upheaval. 3I Atlas appeared in early 2020, a year that will be remembered for global crisis. Though scientists rightly dismiss any physical connection between the comet and earthly events, the timing resonates with uncanny symbolism. Ancient peoples would have seen this as confirmation. The fiery star arrived, and the world was plunged into pestilence and fear. Had they been alive to witness it, the medieval chroniclers who linked comets to plague would have wasted no time declaring 3I Atlas the cause. The Aztec priests would have seen in it the smoking star of doom. The Druids would have declared it the blade of fire. The Hebrews would have called it a fiery messenger. The alignment of timing and turmoil would have been too much for them to ignore. Even its disintegration carries symbolic weight. Prophecies often speak not of a star that remains, but of one that blazes and then is gone. In the Babylonian fragments, the star that vanished into emptiness is described with awe. In Norse tradition, the fiery whale consumes itself in flame. In Hopi prophecy, the blue star Kachina appears only once, its dance completed before the world transforms. 3I Atlas broke apart, its brilliance extinguished before most of humanity even saw it. And yet that very disappearance made it match the pattern. A brief herald, not meant to stay, but only to signal change. Some might ask whether prophecy requires literal fulfillment, or whether it is metaphorical. Could it be that 3I Atlas fulfilled prophecy not by causing destruction but by reminding humanity of its fragility? In this interpretation, the comet was not the cause of crisis, but the mirror of it. Ancient peoples would have read it as such, and perhaps they were not wrong. The universe does not bend itself to human events, but humans bend their perception of the universe to their needs. In times of crisis, we search the heavens for meaning. 3I Atlas arrived at such a moment, and so it was inevitably woven into the same tapestry of omen and prophecy that has bound comets to destiny for millennia. Another question arises: could the ancients have preserved memory of interstellar visitors in their texts? Some suggest that great comets like Halley's with its cycle of 76 years could explain most records, but Halley's is predictable and recurrent. Its returns can be tracked across multiple civilizations. Yet traditions like those of the Sumerians, Chinese, and Ethiopians explicitly describe stars that appeared once and never again. Unless these are exaggerations, they may represent real encounters with interstellar comets. In that case, the prophecies may not be mere invention, but the cultural memory of rare astronomical events. 3I Atlas, then, is not the first, but the latest in a line of fiery wanderers, each remembered as a divine messenger, each woven into the mythologies of their time. If this is so, then perhaps prophecy itself is a kind of long memory. The ancients did not know orbital mechanics, but they knew rarity when they saw it. They knew that most comets returned and some did not. Those that did not were given special names, burned into memory as singular omens. Over time, these memories became prophecies, warnings that one day another such star would appear, and with it, change. The forgotten prophecy may not be written in one place, but scattered across many, whispered in different tongues, yet speaking the same truth. The question of 3 Atlas, then, is not whether it literally fulfilled a single ancient prophecy, but whether it revealed the continuity of human awe. It is the same awe that made Sumerians inscribe omens on clay, that made Druids whisper of fiery blades, that made Aztec priests tremble at smoking stars, that made Ethiopians write of wanderers from afar. The comet reminded us that the universe still sends messengers, that the sky is not static, that we are still subject to sudden fire from the void. In the end, the answer may depend not on science, but on perspective. To astronomy, 3I Atlas was a fragment of ice and dust from another star system pulled into our gaze by chance. To history, it was the latest in a long line of fiery visitors that shaped human imagination. And to prophecy, it was exactly what it has always been, a herald. Not of causes, but of meaning. Not of fate, but of interpretation. A mirror in which we see our fears, our hopes, and our fragility reflected. Was 3I Atlas a forgotten prophecy fulfilled? Perhaps not in the literal sense of a comet announcing the fall of kings, but in a deeper sense, yes. It fulfilled prophecy by showing that prophecy itself is timeless, that humans have always read the heavens for signs, that when a stranger star blazes across the sky, we cannot help but ask what it means. And in that question, in the awe, in the fear, in the trembling sense of connection, we fulfill the prophecy ourselves. The star is the messenger, but the meaning is ours. And so 3I Atlas passed, its fragments lost to the void, its light dimmed. But its presence remains, not in the sky, but in the stories we tell. The forgotten prophecies of the ancients found their echo in its brief blaze, reminding us that the heavens are still alive with wanderers, that the universe is wider than our imagination, and that even now, when a fiery visitor comes from afar, it still speaks to us in the oldest language of all, mystery.